Welcome, and thank you for joining us. This video shares hours of carefully narrated scary stories from abandoned places and forest stories, perfect for nighttime listening. If you enjoy the atmosphere, like, subscribe, and let me know where you're tuning in from. Make yourself comfortable and relax. Story 1. The Ghost Who Keeps Rearranging the Furniture While I Sleep. It started with the armchair. Just a subtle shift, really. I'd left it angled towards the window, catching the late afternoon sun as I read. I woke the next morning, groggy and disoriented, to find it turned squarely to face the television instead. The worn corduroy cushion perfectly aligned with the center of the screen. A trick of the light, I told myself, rubbing the sleep from my eyes. Maybe I'd absent-mindedly moved it after my third cup of coffee the night before and forgotten. Easy enough to dismiss. I turned it back. Problem solved. 2 nights later, it was the bookshelf. Not moved exactly, but reoriented. The heavy oak piece, which had stood flush against the east wall for the 6 months I'd lived in this cramped, rent-controlled apartment above Mrs. Gable's antique shop, was now pushed out at a 45-degree angle, creating a narrow, awkward corridor between it and the door. Dust motes danced in the shaft of morning light where the wall had been exposed, revealing decades of grime and a faint, yellowed outline of where the bookshelf had once stood. My skin prickled. I hadn't touched it. I'd barely even looked at it that day, buried under a mountain of freelance design work. I shoved it back with a grunt, the wood scraping harshly against the old floorboards, my heart thudding a little faster than it should have. "Old building," I muttered aloud, the sound unnervingly loud in the silent apartment. Settling. But buildings don't settle by precisely repositioning heavy furniture into geometrically awkward arrangements. Logic, my usual refuge, began to feel flimsy. The next incident shattered any remaining illusion of coincidence. I came home late after a frustrating client meeting, dumped my bag by the door, and collapsed onto the sofa. It was positioned parallel to the long wall, facing the small kitchenette. I fell into a fitful sleep, the glow of my laptop screen casting long shadows. I woke hours later, stiff and cold, to complete darkness. I fumbled for the lamp on the side table and knocked it over. It clattered to the floor, the bulb shattering. Cursing, I switched on the main light. The sofa wasn't on the long wall. It was in the center of the room, perfectly centered, and it wasn't facing the kitchen anymore. It was facing the apartment's only door, the door that led out to the hallway and the rickety stairs down to Mrs. Gable's shop. My breath hitched. The angle was deliberate, almost confrontational. It felt like a sentry post, a silent observer waiting for someone or something to enter. The empty space where it had been felt like a wound in the room's familiar layout. A cold dread, deeper than mere annoyance, settled in my gut. This wasn't settling. This was intention. I spent the next day researching. The apartment building, a 3-story brick structure squatting on the corner of Elm and 5th, was over a century old. Mrs. Gable, a tiny woman with eyes like chips of obsidian who smelled perpetually of lavender and dust, had owned it since the 70s. When I asked her casually over a cup of weak tea, she insisted I drink while picking up a package she'd held for me about the building's history. She clammed up instantly. Her knuckles whitened around her teacup. "Old places have their ways, dear," she'd said, her voice dropping to a whisper. Best not to pry. Best just to live in it. She refused to elaborate, her gaze darted nervously towards the ceiling, towards my apartment. The look in her eyes wasn't just superstition, it was fear. That night, I decided to fight back. I dragged the sofa back to its rightful place with furious, trembling energy. I positioned the armchair just so. I even placed a small, heavy vase of dried flowers on the coffee table right in the center. A marker, a challenge. Move this, and I'll know it's real. I went to bed, exhausted, leaving the main light on, a pathetic attempt at warding off the unknown. I woke to darkness again. The main light had been switched off. The vase of dried flowers was gone, not knocked over, not moved to another surface. Gone, vanished. The sofa was back in the center of the room facing the door. The armchair was tucked neatly into the far corner facing the wall, as if in shame or punishment. And on the coffee table, where the vase had been, sat a single object. My old, battered copy of The Catcher in the Rye. I hadn't touched that book in years. It had been buried in a cardboard box labeled Misk Books in the back of my tiny closet. The ghost hadn't just rearranged the furniture. It had gone into my private space, my stored memories, and chosen a book. Placed it deliberately on the table. Why? Was it a message? A threat? Or just tidying? Panic, cold and sharp, began to replace the dread. This wasn't just about space anymore. It was about me. My things, my history, my sanctuary was being violated on a fundamental level. Sleep became impossible. I'd lie in bed, every creak of the old building, every sigh of the ancient pipes sounding like the scrape of chair legs on wood. I'd drift off, only to jerk awake hours later, convinced I'd heard the soft, deliberate thump of furniture being shifted. My eyes would snap open, straining in the darkness, searching for the familiar silhouette of the sofa, only to find it wrong, always subtly, insidiously wrong. The rearrangements grew more complex, more personal. One morning I found all my shoes neatly lined up just inside the front door, pairs perfectly matched, laces tucked. Another day, every framed photograph on my walls had been turned to face the wall. My spice rack, usually a chaotic jumble above the stove, was organized alphabetically. My coffee mugs, which lived in a specific cabinet, were arranged by size on the counter. It was cleaning, organizing, but with a chilling, impersonal precision that felt utterly alien. It wasn't helpful. It was corrective. As if my own chaotic existence was an offense to the ghost's sense of order. The worst was the bed. I woke one morning to find it pushed flush against the wall shared with the vacant apartment next door. Not the usual headboard against wall position. The entire side of the bed was pressed flat against the plaster. Getting in and out required climbing over the footboard. It felt like being pinned, trapped. I spent hours that day wrestling it back, my muscles screaming, sweat stinging my eyes, fueled by a rage that bordered on hysteria. "Leave me alone!" I shouted into the empty apartment, my voice cracking. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with an unspoken answer. I started sleeping with the lights on, all of them. The overhead, the lamps, even the tiny nightlight in the bathroom. The electricity bill would be astronomical. But the darkness felt like an accomplice. In the harsh, unblinking glare, the apartment felt safer, more solid. The furniture stayed put. For 3 nights, blessed stillness. Maybe the light was a deterrent. Maybe it was just coincidence. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered. Then came the night, the lights went out. It wasn't a power failure. The street lights outside still cast their orange glow through the grimy window. It was the apartment's lights. One by one they clicked off. The overhead light first, then the reading lamp by the sofa, then the lamp on my dresser. Click, click, click. In the sudden relative gloom, my heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I fumbled for my phone, my fingers clumsy with terror, and switched on the flashlight app. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating dust motes swirling in the air. The sofa was gone, not moved. Gone? The space where it should have been was empty. The armchair was gone too. The coffee table, the bookshelf, all my major furniture had vanished, leaving only the bed, the dresser, and the kitchen table and chairs. The room felt cavernous, hollowed out. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. Where did it go? I swept the flashlight beam around the room. Nothing, just bare floorboards and empty space. Then the beam caught something on the far wall opposite the door. Words, scratched into the peeling paint, deep and jagged, as if carved with frantic, desperate fingernails. 3 words, stay in bed. The command, raw and primal, sent a wave of pure terror through me. It wasn't a suggestion. It was an order from something that knew I was awake, something that was watching, something that controlled the very walls of my home. I froze, the phone trembling in my hand, the beam fixed on those awful words. The silence was absolute, thick enough to choke on. I could hear the blood rushing in my ears, the frantic thud of my heart. Slowly, deliberately, a sound began. From the hallway outside, my apartment door. The soft, rhythmic creak, creak, creak of something heavy being dragged across the floorboards, pausing, then dragging again. It stopped right outside my door. The brass knob turned slowly, silently. The door swung inwards on well-oiled hinges I hadn't known existed. The hallway light was off, but the streetlight outside the building's main entrance cast a long, distorted shadow into my room. A shadow of something large, impossibly large. And within that shadow, 2 points of faint, sickly yellow light glowed where eyes should be. It didn't step inside. It just stood there, filling the doorway, radiating a cold that had nothing to do with temperature. A cold that seeped into my bones, into the marrow of my fear. The dragging sound started again, but this time it was coming from inside my apartment, from the direction of the vacant rooms beyond my bedroom wall. The sound of furniture being pulled back into place, slowly, deliberately, as if setting the stage. The shadow in the doorway didn't move, it just watched. Those yellow eyes fixed on me where I stood, paralyzed, next to my bed. The message was clear, colder than the deepest winter. You can rearrange it, I will put it back, and I will watch you while I do. I don't sleep with the lights off anymore. I don't sleep much at all. I sit in the center of the room on the floor, my back against the cold plaster of the wall farthest from the door, a baseball bat across my knees. The furniture is back. Everything is in its proper place, the way the ghost prefers. The sofa facing the door like a sentinel, the armchair tucked away, the bed pushed tight against the shared wall. I haven't touched anything. I eat standing up at the kitchen counter. I shower with the bathroom light blazing, jumping at every drip of the faucet. Mrs. Gable hasn't spoken to me since I asked about the building. She just gives me wary, pitying looks when I pass her on the stairs, clutching my groceries like a shield. She knows. She's always known. Sometimes, in the dead silence of 3 a.m., I hear it. Not dragging anymore, something softer, a faint, rhythmic tap, tap, tapping, like fingernails, gentle, patient, tapping against the inside of the wall shared with the vacant apartment, right where my head rests on the pillow when I'm forced by sheer exhaustion to risk lying down. It's not trying to get in. It's reminding me it's there, that it's waiting, that this apartment isn't mine. It never was. It belongs to the one who rearranges the furniture, who organizes the chaos, who enforces its silent, suffocating order. And it has decided I am part of the furniture now, something to be positioned, managed, controlled. The tapping continues, steady, inexorable, like a clock counting down the seconds until I finally move just an inch out of place. And with that, this story is over. Now, a new story begins. The house doesn't want us here, and it shows us every night. The realtor called it a fixer-upper with character. Mom called it a fresh start after Dad walked out, taking his paycheck and his promises, leaving us with eviction notices and the hollow echo of our old apartment. The house on Hemlock Lane didn't look evil in the daylight, just tired. A 2-story Victorian with peeling paint the color of dried blood, sagging porches held up by splintered beams, and windows so grimy they looked like cataracts clouding its eyes. The price, $150,000 for a 5-bedroom with a wraparound porch, was a miracle after the city auctioned it off, following the previous owner's suicide. "Eccentric fellow," the realtor had murmured, avoiding our eyes as she handed Mom the keys. "Lived alone for 30 years, died in the master bedroom. Heart failure, they say." She paused at the overgrown gate, her smile tight. "Just keep the basement door locked, and maybe avoid the 3rd-floor nursery. Kids get nightmares in old houses." She drove off before Mom could ask why. We moved in on a Tuesday. Boxes littered the dusty floors of rooms that smelled of mildew and forgotten time. 10-year-old Lily skipped ahead, already claiming the smallest bedroom with the chipped floral wallpaper. "It's perfect, Mom," she chirped, swinging her stuffed rabbit by its ear. I was 12, old enough to feel the weight of the house settling around us like a shroud. The air was unnaturally still, thick and cold despite the August heat outside. Every footstep echoed too loudly. Every door groaned like it was reluctant to open. Mom forced cheer into her voice, unpacking dishes with trembling hands. "It just needs love, girls. We'll fill it with laughter." But the silence that followed her words wasn't peaceful. It was watchful, waiting. That first night, the house spoke. I woke at 2:11 a.m. to the sound of dripping, not in the bathroom, in the hallway outside my room. Plink, 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 slow, deliberate. I crept to my door, pressing my ear to the wood. The dripping stopped. Then a new sound, a low, wet gurgle like mud bubbling in a drain, and beneath it, a whisper that wasn't a voice but a vibration in the floorboards. "Go." I flung open my door. The hallway was empty. But the floorboards glistened with dark, viscous liquid that smelled of river clay and rotting leaves. It seeped from beneath the basement door, a heavy, scarred thing with a tarnished padlock hanging open. Mom had locked it that afternoon. I hadn't touched it. The puddles spread toward Lily's room, pooling under her door. I mopped it up with towels, my hands shaking, and jammed a chair under the basement door handle. When I checked Lily's room, she was asleep, her face peaceful, but her stuffed rabbit lay on the floor, soaked through, one button eye missing. Mom dismissed it. "Old pipes," she said at breakfast, stirring her coffee too hard. "Or a leaky roof. We'll call a plumber." But her knuckles were white on the mug. Lily didn't mention the rabbit. She just stared out the window at the overgrown garden, her small shoulders hunched. "The flowers are sad," she whispered. "They say the dirt is hungry." The house escalated. That night, the dripping returned, louder, accompanied by scratching, not mice, but long, deliberate scrapes like fingernails dragging down the inside of the walls. Scritch, scritch, scritch. I found Lily's bedroom door locked from the inside at dawn. When I finally got it open, she was sitting cross-legged on the floor, crayons scattered around her. She'd drawn the same picture over and over, a tall, crooked house with black windows. In front, 3 stick figures, Mom, me, Lily, were drawn in red crayon floating upward like smoke. The house had a mouth, wide, grinning, at the bottom in wobbly letters. "It wants us gone." Mom tried to laugh it off. "Just a nightmare, sweetie." But that afternoon, while unpacking the kitchen, I saw it. The wallpaper in the hall wasn't just peeling, it was bleeding. Thick, rust-colored streaks oozed from the seams, forming words in jagged, dripping letters. "Leave while you can." The smell of copper filled the air. I scrubbed it until my hands were raw. By evening, it was gone. But the words were etched into my mind. The basement door became the heart of it. No matter how many chairs I wedged under the handle, no matter how many new locks Mom installed, it would swing open by dawn. The cold that poured out wasn't just chill, it was a physical force, stealing breath, frosting the doorknob. One morning, frost coated the entire 3rd stair, and on it, written in condensation, "Your tears taste like salt." Then came the photographs. Mom kept our family albums in a box under her bed. One rainy Thursday, Lily pulled one out, giggling. "Look, we're happy." But the photos had changed. In every picture, birthdays, vacations, school plays, the house loomed in the background. Its windows weren't dark. They were eyes, glowing faintly. And in the last photo, taken just last month at the city park, our smiles were frozen, but behind us, the skeletal branches of a dead oak formed the unmistakable shape of a pointing finger aimed directly at our backs. At the bottom of the box, a new photo lay face down. I turned it over. It showed our new house at twilight. On the porch stood 3 figures, Mom, Lily, and me, but our faces were blurred smudges of shadow. Only our eyes were visible, wide, terrified, and scrawled across the bottom in what looked like dried mud. "Stay and starve." Mom finally broke down. She called the realtor, her voice cracking. "What aren't you telling me?" The realtor's sigh was audible even to me, standing 3 feet away. The owner, Mr. Hargrave, he wasn't eccentric. He was afraid. His wife and daughter vanished here in 1999. No note. No signs of struggle. Just gone. Hargrave claimed the house took them. Said it fed on loneliness. After he died, the bank cleared out the place. They found things, Sarah, things buried under floorboards. Dolls with their faces scratched off, jars of salt, nails bent backward, and on every mirror, the same words. It watches. It waits. The line went dead before Mom could respond. That night, the house showed us why we shouldn't stay. It started with the lights. All at once, every bulb in the house blew out, not with a pop, but a sigh, plunging us into total darkness. Lily's scream cut through the silence. "Mom, it's in my room. The shadow on the wall, it's moving." I ran to her, stumbling over boxes in the pitch black. Moonlight bled through her window, painting the room in shades of bone. The shadow on the far wall wasn't cast by anything in the room. It was a hunched, skeletal shape, its elongated fingers stretching toward Lily's bed. As I watched, frozen, it turned its head, a smooth, impossible rotation, and its shadow eyes fixed on mine. The vibration filled the air, deeper now, shaking the floorboards. "She'll be next, like the other girl." Mom burst in with a flashlight. The shadow vanished, but the words hung in the cold air. Lily sobbed into Mom's shoulder. "It said my name, Mommy. It called me Emily. Emily, Hargrave's daughter." We huddled in the living room, flashlights trembling in our hands. The house groaned around us, a symphony of settling beams and shifting wood. But beneath it, a new sound, a slow, rhythmic thumping from the basement. Thump, 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 like a giant sleeping heart. Then water began to seep under the basement door, not the thick, earthy sludge from before, clear, cold, rising fast. Within minutes, it lapped at our ankles. The smell of chlorine cut through the damp. "It's flooding," Mom gasped, grabbing Lily. I yanked open the front door. The porch steps were gone. Where they should have been, the ground had collapsed into a deep, muddy sinkhole filled with swirling black water. Our escape was sealed. The water rose to our knees. The thumping grew louder, shaking the walls. Plaster rained from the ceiling. The vibration wasn't just in the air now. It was in our bones, a deep, guttural growl that wasn't language, but pure hatred. "You belong to the dirt, like the others." Mom made a decision. She waded toward the stairs, Lily clinging to her neck. "The attic," she gasped. "It's the highest point." We splashed up the steps, the water chasing us like a living thing. The thumping followed, louder with every step, shaking the banister. On the second-floor landing, the wallpaper bulged outward, splitting open with a wet tear. Dark roots, thick as wrists, slick with mud, snaked out, grasping at our ankles. They didn't burn, they clung, icy and strong, pulling us toward the tear in the wall. Behind it wasn't lath and plaster. It was earth, damp, black soil, smelling of graves. And deep within it, two small white shapes gleamed, a child's shoe, a woman's bracelet. I screamed, kicking free. Mom grabbed Lily and lunged for the attic stairs. The roots followed, slithering up the wall, tearing more wallpaper away. The attic door was padlocked, a flimsy thing Hargrave must have added. I smashed it open with a fire poker from the hall closet. We tumbled inside, slamming the door shut, just as the roots thudded against the wood. The attic was freezing. Moonlight streamed through a single dusty window, illuminating trunks draped in sheets and cobwebs thick as lace. But on the far wall, something glowed faintly. Not mold, not paint. Words etched into the wood itself, pulsing with a sickly green light. "Bury the lonely. Feed the foundation." Lily pointed, trembling. "Look." In the corner, half hidden under a rotting quilt, sat two small, crude dolls, one dressed in a yellow dress, one in a floral apron. Their faces were scribbled over with charcoal, but pinned to their chests were tiny, faded photographs. A smiling woman with Mom's eyes, a little girl with Lily's freckles. Their names were stitched beneath the photos in fraying thread. Martha. Emily. Hargrave hadn't just lost them. He'd tried to feed them to the house, to buy time. The roots thudded harder against the attic door. Wood splintered. A thick, mudded tendril snaked through the crack, reaching for Lily. Mom grabbed a rusted ice axe from a trunk and hacked at it. The root recoiled, oozing black fluid that smelled of decay. "It wants our sadness," she whispered, her voice raw. "It feeds on it. That's why it shows us these things. It's tasting us." I remembered a note from the realtor's folder, the one about Hargrave's journals. It hungers for the spaces between heartbeats. The house didn't just want us gone. It wanted us broken. It wanted Mom's grief over Dad, my fear of being unlovable, Lily's confusion about why her father left. It was drinking our pain like wine. The door groaned. More roots burst through, lashing like whips. One wrapped around Mom's wrist, yanking her toward the splintered wood. Lily screamed. I didn't think. I ran to the glowing words on the wall. "Bury the lonely, feed the foundation." I pressed my palms against the wood. "You don't get us," I shouted, tears freezing on my cheeks. "You don't get our sadness. We're not lonely. We have each other." Silence. The thudding stopped. The roots froze mid-lash. The green glow on the wall flickered. For a heartbeat, the house held its breath. Then, a new vibration, not the growl, but something thin, almost human. A whisper from the walls themselves. "Liar!" The roots surged forward. Mom cried out as the one around her wrist tightened. Lily stumbled back, tripping over a trunk. Her head hit the floorboards with a sickening crack. She didn't move. Something in me snapped. Not fear, rage, pure white-hot fury at this thing that had taken everything from us, our home, our safety, our father, and now wanted to take Lily too. I grabbed the ice axe from Mom's limp hand, not to cut the roots, to smash the wall. I swung with all my strength. The axe head bit deep into the wood where the glowing words pulsed. Splinters flew. Black liquid gushed from the wound in the wall, sizzling like acid. The vibration became a shriek, a sound of tearing stone and snapping roots. The entire house shook. Dust rained from the rafters. The roots shriveled, blackening and crumbling to ash at our feet. The water flooding the lower floors drained away with a wet, sucking sound. Moonlight fell on Lily's still face. Mom crawled to her, sobbing, "Lily, oh God, Lily!" Lily's eyes fluttered open. "Mommy," she whispered, "it's quiet now." Dawn painted the attic window pink. The house was silent, truly silent. No dripping, no scratching, no vibration in the floor. The green words on the wall were gone. Only a deep gash in the wood remained, oozing a clear, watery sap that smelled faintly of pine. We didn't sleep in the house that day. We sat on the porch steps, repaired overnight, the sinkhole filled with fresh soil, as if the house had spat us out. Mr. Finch, the realtor, arrived at noon, his face pale. "The locks on the basement door were melted," he said, not meeting our eyes. "The foundation, it's stable. Stronger than it's been in years." He handed Mom a thick envelope. Hargrave's estate lawyer called, said Hargrave left a letter for the next family who stayed. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the handwriting spidery and weak. I fed it my grief. I fed it my daughter's laughter. I fed it my wife's tears. It only grew hungrier. It doesn't want you gone. It wants you broken. It wants the hollow places inside you. Don't give it your sadness. Give it your rage. Give it your love. That's The only thing it can't digest, that's the only thing that makes it bleed. We stayed. We patched the gash in the attic wall with fresh wood. We replanted the garden where the sinkhole had been. We painted Lily's room sunshine yellow. The house still groans. Pipes still clank. But the cold spots are gone. The dripping only happens when it rains. Some nights, when the moon is full, I sit on the repaired porch with Mom and Lily. We drink hot chocolate and watch the fireflies blink over the new flower beds. The house breathes around us a slow, deep rhythm that's almost peaceful. But sometimes, in the deepest quiet, I feel it, a faint vibration in the floorboards. Not a growl, a hum, almost like a lullaby. And if I press my palm to the porch railing, the wood is warm, not with heat, with something like contentment. Lily doesn't draw grim reaper houses anymore. Last week, she showed me a new picture. Our house, but with smiling suns in every window. 3 stick figures stand on the porch, holding hands. At the bottom, in careful letters, "We feed it, joy now." Mom kissed the top of her head. "That's right, sweetie. I know the truth, though. The house is still hungry. It always will be. But we learned its rules. We don't lock our grief away in dark corners where it can fester. We let it out. In tears on the porch swing, in arguments at the dinner table, in Mom's quiet sobs when she thinks we're asleep. And then we drown it in noise, in Lily's laughter when she chases fireflies, in Mom humming off key while she cooks, in movie nights on the couch, blankets tangled, sharing a single bowl of popcorn. The house takes it all, the sadness, the joy. It drinks deep. But it doesn't feast on us anymore. It lives with us. A tenant in the walls, a guest at our table. Sometimes, when I'm alone in the kitchen at night, I whisper to the shadows in the corners, "You want my loneliness? Come take it. But you'll have to get through Mom's pot roast first, and Lily's knock-knock jokes." The shadows don't answer, but the lights don't flicker. The floorboards don't creak, and the air stays warm. Last Tuesday, Lily left a plate of cookies on the porch steps. "For the house," she said solemnly. By morning, the cookies were gone. Only crumbs remained, and in the dew on the railing, written as if by a fingertip, "Thank you." Mom saw it. She didn't scream. She just smiled, a real one this time, and refilled the plate. We're not safe. Not really. But we're not prey anymore. The house doesn't want us gone. It wants us here. Whole, loud, fighting. Because a heart that beats with love, even broken love, is harder to swallow than one that's already hollow. At night, when Lily sleeps soundly in her yellow room, I sit on the porch swing. The house sighs around me, a deep, settling sound, like roots sinking into good earth. I rest my hand on the warm wood of the railing. "Stay full," I whisper into the dark, "but don't you dare forget who feeds you." The wind rustles the new leaves on the oak tree where the pointing branch once grew. The house doesn't answer. It just holds us tight. For now, that's enough. And so, this story comes to an end. Let's start another. The house that remembers. I am writing this from a borrowed laptop in a library in Duluth, Minnesota. I don't have a phone anymore. I don't have a car. I walked here in the snow wearing boots that aren't mine. If you're reading this and you see a listing on Airbnb for a secluded historic manor in the Blackwoods with a host named Mrs. Gable, do not book it. Do not even look at the photos. The photos are a lie, but not in the way you think. The photos show the house as it wants to be seen. They don't show what it keeps in the walls. My name is Sarah. I'm a freelance photographer, or I was. I specialize in architectural photography, abandoned places, ruins, the kind of decay porn that gets likes on Instagram. I was broke, my camera gear was pawned, and I needed a gig. When I got the email from a private client offering me $5,000 to document a family estate before it was demolished, I jumped at it. The client, a lawyer named Mr. Sterling, was vague. "The house has history," he said on the phone. His voice was tinny, like he was speaking from inside a metal box. "The family wants a record of it, every room, every corner, but you must do it at night. The lighting is specific." "At night?" I asked. "Yes, the house wakes up at night. The architecture changes with the shadows. It's an aesthetic choice." I agreed. I rented a car, bought back my camera, and drove north. The house was located at the end of a long, overgrown driveway that wound through a forest of dead birch trees. They looked like white bones sticking out of the earth. The house itself was a monstrosity. It was Victorian, but wrong. The angles were too sharp. The windows were too narrow, like squinting eyes. It was painted a color that might have been blue once, but had rotted into a bruised purple. Mr. Sterling wasn't there. He had left a key under the mat, a heavy iron key that felt cold enough to burn my skin. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The smell hit me first. It wasn't mold or dust. It smelled like dried flowers and old perfume, masking something underneath, something like raw meat left in the sun. The interior was pristine, dust-free. The furniture was draped in white sheets. The mirrors were covered with black cloth. I set up my gear in the foyer. It was 8 p.m. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the floorboards. I started shooting. Click, flash, whir. The first hour was normal. I moved from room to room, the library, the dining hall, the parlor. The house was beautiful in a grotesque way. The wallpaper was patterned with intricate vines that looked like arteries. The chandeliers were made of crystal drops that resembled tears. But as midnight approached, the house changed. I was in the kitchen. It was a large tiled room with a massive cast iron stove. I was setting up my tripod to capture the stove when I heard it. Clink. It sounded like silverware hitting a plate. I froze. "Hello?" Silence. I looked around. The kitchen was empty. The drawers were closed. Clink. Scrape. It came from the dining room, the room I had just left. I grabbed my tripod, wielding it like a club, and walked slowly to the dining room doorway. The room was dark. My flashlight beam cut through the gloom. The table, which had been empty 10 minutes ago, was set. There were 4 place settings: fine china, crystal goblets, silver cutlery arranged perfectly, and in the center of the table there was a roast, a steaming hot roast beef, oozing red juices onto a silver platter. My breath caught in my throat. I was alone. I had locked the door. I walked closer. The heat from the meat hit my face. It was real. I raised my camera. I had to document this. Click. The flash illuminated the room for a split second. In that split second, I saw them. Seated at the 4 chairs were figures. They were translucent, like smoke caught in glass. A man, a woman, and 2 children. They were dressed in clothes from the 1900s, but their faces were blurred, smudged, like someone had taken an eraser to a pencil drawing. Where their eyes and mouths should be, there was just smooth gray skin. The flash died. Darkness returned. I shined my flashlight at the chairs. Empty. The food was still there. I backed away, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Okay," I whispered. "Prank. Someone is messing with me." I turned to run to the front door. It was gone. Where the front door had been, there was now a wall, a solid wall covered in the artery-patterned wallpaper. I touched it. It was cold and damp. It felt like skin. I ran to the windows. They were shuttered from the outside. I tried to lift the sash, painted shut. I smashed the glass with my tripod. Behind the glass there was no outside. There were bricks, a solid wall of bricks. I was sealed in. Then the whispering started. It came from the vents, from the floorboards, from the walls themselves. She sees us. She sees the dinner. Does she want a plate? She looks hungry. I ran up the stairs. Why? I don't know. Instinct. High ground. I barricaded myself in the master bedroom. It had a heavy oak door with a bolt lock. I slid the bolt home and pushed a dresser in front of it. I sat on the bed, shaking. I checked my photos on the camera's display screen. The photo of the dining room. In the picture, the chairs were empty, but the roast beef wasn't meat. It was a human head, a severed gray head on a platter, and it was screaming. I dropped the camera. It hit the floor and the lens shattered. I huddled in the corner. "This isn't real. This isn't real." Knock, knock, knock. 3 polite taps on the bedroom door. "Room service," a voice called. It was a cheerful sing-song voice, a maid's voice. "Go away," I screamed. "But you didn't finish your dinner, miss," the voice said. "The master is offended." The doorknob rattled, slowly, then violently. The heavy dresser began to slide across the floor. Something with immense strength was pushing the door open. I looked around the room. There was a fireplace, a chimney. It was my only way out. I grabbed the fire poker and ran to the hearth. I looked up. It was dark, narrow, and smelled of soot. The bedroom door splintered. A hand reached through. It was gray, elongated, with fingers that had too many joints. I climbed into the fireplace. I pulled myself up onto the smoke shelf. I heard the door smash open. I heard heavy, wet footsteps enter the room. "Where is the little mouse?" a deep, guttural voice growled. "She went up the chimney, sir," the maid's voice giggled. "Smoke her out," the deep voice said. I heard the strike of a match, then the whoosh of flames. Heat surged up the chimney. Smoke billowed around me. I coughed, my eyes burning. I climbed. I clawed at the rough bricks, tearing my fingernails. The heat was scorching the soles of my boots. I climbed until I saw stars. I pulled myself out onto the roof. I collapsed on the cold slate tiles, gasping for air. The smoke poured out of the chimney next to me, thick and black. I looked down. It was a 30-foot drop to the ground. But the ground was moving. The lawn wasn't grass. It was a sea of hands. Thousands of gray, spectral hands reaching up from the earth, grasping at the air. "Jump," they whispered. "Join us." I looked around the roof. There was a trellis on the side of the house, covered in dead vines. I crawled to it. I swung my legs over the edge. As I climbed down, I looked into the windows on the second floor. In every window, a face was watching me. The smudged faces, the eraser people, they were pressing against the glass, their featureless heads tracking my movement. And behind them, in the hallway, stood a tall shadow. It wore a top hat. It held a silver platter. I reached the ground. The spectral hands grabbed at my boots, but they were weak, misty. I kicked through them. I ran to my car. I fumbled for my keys. They were gone. I must have dropped them inside. I looked at the car. The tires were slashed, all 4 of them, and on the hood, scratched into the paint, were words, "Stay for dessert." I didn't stop. I ran into the woods. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until the sun came up. I found a road. A truck driver picked me up. He didn't ask questions about the soot or the blood or the fact that I was crying hysterically. He dropped me off here in Duluth. I went to the police. I told them everything. They looked up the address I gave them. "Ma'am," the officer said gently, "there is no house at that location. That's the old Blackwood fire zone. A manor burned down there in 1922. Killed the whole family. They say the father went mad and poisoned them at dinner before setting the place alight." "I was there," I insisted. "I have photos." I reached for my camera bag. It was empty. The camera was gone. I had dropped it in the bedroom, but I found something else in the bag, a silver fork. It was heavy, tarnished antique silver, and engraved on the handle was a name, Sterling, the lawyer, the client. He wasn't a lawyer, he was one of them. I left the station. I pawned the fork for cash. That's how I'm surviving. But here is why I'm writing this. Here is why I am terrified. Yesterday, I bought a disposable camera to take photos for a new job listing I found. Landscape work, safe work. I developed a film at a 1-hour photo lab. The first 12 photos were just trees and lakes. But the last photo, I didn't take the last photo. It shows me sleeping. In the motel room I stayed in last night, I'm asleep in the bed. And standing over me, looking down at my face, are the 4 smudged figures, the family, and in the corner of the room, reflected in the mirror, is the tall shadow with the top hat. He is holding a silver platter, and on the platter there is a camera lens. My broken camera lens. They followed me. They are not bound to the house. The house is just where they eat. And they are still hungry. I am leaving this laptop here. I am leaving this town. I don't know where I'm going. Somewhere crowded, somewhere bright. But I know it won't matter, because just now, as I was typing this, the librarian walked by. She smiled at me, but for a split second, her face blurred. Her eyes and mouth disappeared, leaving only smooth gray skin. And she whispered, in a voice that sounded like silverware on a plate, "Dinner is served." As this story comes to rest, a new whisper begins. The mirror in our hallway shows someone who isn't in the house. It was the first thing we saw when we signed the papers for the old Victorian on Sycamore Street. Not the peeling gingerbread trim or the sagging porch, but the mirror. It hung in the narrow front hallway, directly opposite the front door. A tall, ornate thing in a tarnished silver frame, its glass wavy and clouded with age. "Original to the house," the realtor chirped, oblivious to the way my wife Lena's smile tightened. "Such character!" Lena hated it immediately, said it gave her the creeps. I called it practical. It was the only mirror in the entryway, but it wasn't practical. It was a window, and something on the other side was watching. The first time I noticed it was subtle. I was alone, dropping my keys into the bowl beneath it after work. In the glass, my reflection moved just a fraction too slow, like a lagging video feed. I blinked, shook my head. Tired. New house jitters. But later that night, Lena whispered in the dark, Did you see it too? In the mirror? When I was putting on my shoes this morning, there was someone behind me for just a second, a woman in a dark dress. I dismissed it. Stress. A trick of the warped glass. Until I saw her myself. It was a Tuesday. Rain lashed the windows. I was alone, sorting mail in the quiet hallway. I glanced up at the mirror as I passed. My reflection was there, yes, but behind my shoulder, in the space where the empty hallway should have been, stood a woman. She was tall, gaunt, dressed in a high-collared black dress that looked decades out of date. Her face was pale, almost translucent, with deep-set eyes that held a sadness so profound it made my chest ache. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring down the hall towards the kitchen, her expression one of desperate longing. I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing, just the empty hallway, the sound of rain, the smell of damp wool from my coat. I turned back to the mirror. She was gone. Only my own wide-eyed face stared back, pale and shaken. Lena started avoiding the hallway. She'd take the long way around through the dining room to get to the kitchen. "It's not right," she'd mutter, wrapping her arms around herself. "She's always looking for something or someone." I tried logic. Research. The house was built in 1890, owned by the Ainsley family for generations. Records were spotty, but I found a faded newspaper clipped from 1923. Eleanor Ainsley, 38, lost to influenza. Leaves husband and infant son. The photo showed a young woman with dark hair and those same deep, sorrowful eyes. Eleanor. The name settled in my bones like cold stone. The mirror's rules became clear. It only showed her when you were alone, never when two people stood together before it, and she never looked at the viewer. Always down the hall towards the back of the house, the direction of the nursery, the old nursery, now our storage room. The sight of her became a physical weight. Coming home from work, my hand would hover over the doorknob, dreading that glance into the glass. Sometimes she'd be there, standing silently in the reflection's hallway, wringing her hands. Other times she'd be crouched near the floorboards, as if searching for something small. Once I saw her gently touch the reflection of the door to the storage room, her fingers tracing the wood grain with heartbreaking tenderness. The air around the mirror would turn icy cold when she appeared, and a faint scent, like old roses and dust, would hang in the air long after she vanished. Lena couldn't take it anymore. "We have to cover it," she insisted one evening, her voice brittle. "Or take it down. It's not healthy. She's not ours." I agreed, though part of me felt a strange protectiveness towards Eleanor's silent vigil. That night, after Lena went to bed, I stood before the mirror alone. The glass was fogged, as if breathed upon. In the condensation, words appeared, written in a shaky lupin hand. "He won't let me see him." My breath caught. Him, the infant son, Thomas, who'd grown up, inherited the house, died childless decades ago. Who was Eleanor waiting for now? I found a heavy quilt Lena had chosen. As I unfolded it, the hallway temperature plummeted. My breath plumed white. The mirror's surface rippled like dark water. Eleanor appeared. Not in the hallway reflection this time. She was in the glass, standing right behind my reflection, so close her cold breath seemed to kiss the back of my neck. Her eyes, wide and impossibly sad, met mine through the mirror, not looking past me, looking at me for the first time. Her lips moved, forming silent words. "Please." The quilt slipped from my numb fingers. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Her hand, pale and translucent, pressed against the inside of the glass. It left a perfect frost-rhymed handprint that didn't fade when she vanished seconds later, leaving only the icy handprint and the scent of grave soil. We covered the mirror the next day, heavy blackout cloth nailed tightly over the frame. The house felt lighter, warmer. Lena slept through the night for the first time in weeks. I almost believed it was over until a dream started. Vivid, suffocating dreams of standing in a darkened nursery, moonlight through a grimy window, a crib, and the sound of a baby crying, a thin, weak wail that cut through the silence. And always just outside the nursery door in the dream hallway, a woman's muffled sobs. Eleanor's sobs. I'd wake gasping, the sound of that crying echoing in my ears, the smell of old roses thick in the bedroom air. Lena never heard it, only me. The breaking point came 3 weeks later. Lena was away visiting her mother. The house felt unnaturally silent, oppressive. I was making tea in the kitchen when I heard it, faint at first, a soft, rhythmic thumping, like a small fist against wood, coming from the hallway, from behind the covered mirror. I crept out, my mug forgotten. The cloth over the mirror was bulging inward, straining against the nails. Thump, 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 a child's fist, and beneath it, Eleanor's voice, raw with tears, whispering through the cloth. "Thomas, Mama's here. Please, open the door." The nails holding the cloth began to pop out one by one, showering the floor with plaster dust. The cloth billowed like a sail catching wind. I couldn't move, couldn't think. The thumping grew frantic. Thump, thump, thump. The final nail tore free. The cloth fell away. The mirror wasn't reflecting the hallway. It showed a small, dimly lit room, a nursery. Moonlight streamed through a dusty window, illuminating a simple wooden crib. And standing beside it, her back to the glass, was Eleanor. She was gently rocking the crib, humming a lullaby I'd never heard, but somehow knew in my marrow. In the crib, a tiny bundle stirred. A weak cry escaped, a real, living sound that echoed through the glass into my silent hallway. Eleanor turned slightly, her face illuminated by the moonlight. Not sad now, radiant, peaceful. She looked directly at me through the glass, her eyes filled with a love so fierce it stole my breath. She placed a finger to her lips. Shh. Then she gestured subtly towards the nursery door, a door that in the mirror world stood slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. Her eyes flicked to the door, then back to me, wide with sudden, desperate fear. "He's coming." A shadow filled the doorway in the mirror, tall, imposing, silhouetted against the hall light. Not Thomas, grown old. Something else. Something that radiated cold malice. Eleanor grabbed the edge of the crib, pulling it back, shielding the baby with her body. The shadow man stepped into the nursery. He didn't have a face, just a deeper darkness where one should be. He reached a long, shadowed hand towards the crib. Eleanor let out a silent scream, throwing herself over her child. I acted without thought. I grabbed the heavy brass candlestick from the hall table and swung it with all my strength at the mirror. Glass exploded outwards in a deadly rain of shards. The image of the nursery, Eleanor's terrified face, the shadow hand reaching for the crib, all vanished in a spiderweb of fractures. The cold vanished. The scent of roses faded. Silence crashed down thick with the smell of dust and broken glass. I sank to my knees in the debris, shaken, cuts stinging on my arms from the flying shards. The hallway was just a hallway again. The mirror was a jagged hole in the wall, reflecting only broken plaster and dangling wires. Relief flooded me, so intense it made me dizzy. It was over. I'd saved them. I'd broken the window. But as I sat there catching my breath, a single shard of mirror, no bigger than my palm, lay at my feet, unbroken. In its tiny, warped reflection, I saw not my own face. I saw Eleanor. She was standing alone in the empty nursery, the crib gone. The moonlight was gone. The room was dark, lit only by a single guttering candle. She wasn't crying. She was looking directly at me through the shard, her expression not sad but resigned, resolved. She raised her hand slowly, not in fear, but in farewell. Then she turned and walked towards the nursery door, the door that now stood wide open, revealing not darkness, but a soft, golden light spilling from a room beyond. She paused on the threshold, glancing back one last time. Her lips moved. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew them. Thank you. The shard went dark, just glass. I picked it up, the edges sharp against my skin. The cuts on my arms didn't hurt any more. A deep calm settled over me, deeper than any relief. The house felt different, not lighter, fuller. The silence wasn't empty. It was listening, waiting. I carried the shard to the kitchen and placed it carefully on the windowsill, where the morning light would find it. As I cleaned the broken glass from the hallway, I didn't sweep the largest pieces away. I left them scattered on the floorboards, glinting like fallen stars. They felt like anchors, like promises. Lena came home the next day. She hugged me tightly at the door, chattering about her trip, oblivious to the change in the air. She didn't mention the missing mirror, didn't comment on the shards glinting on the floor. She just smiled, a real warm smile I hadn't seen in months. "It feels different here," she said softly, tilting her head as if listening to a distant song. Peaceful. She didn't see the frost forming on the window pane that night, spelling out 2 words in delicate crystals. He's free. I don't cover the shard on the windowsill. I let the moonlight catch it. Sometimes in the deepest quiet of 3 a.m., I stand in the hallway where the mirror hung. The floorboards are cold under my bare feet. I close my eyes, and I hear it, faint but clear. A baby's happy gurgle and a woman's soft, contented sigh, not from the nursery, from the walls, from the very bones of the house. Eleanor isn't trapped anymore. She's home, and the shadow, it's gone, banished by broken glass and a desperate act of love. But the house remembers. It holds their peace like a sacred thing. I feel it in my own bones now, the deep, quiet warmth where the cold used to live. Last night, I placed my palm flat against the wall where the mirror hung. The plaster was warm, and beneath my hand, so faint I might have imagined it, I felt a single, gentle vibration, like a heartbeat, like a lullaby. I left my hand there until dawn painted the hallway gold. The shard on the sill caught the light, glowing like a tiny sun. I know I'll see her again, not in glass, but when my own time comes. She'll be waiting at that golden door, her hand outstretched, her eyes no longer sad. She'll lead me to the quiet room beyond the nursery door, to where the crying has finally stopped, to where we all belong. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm coming home. This is where the story ends. Let's continue with the next. The old woman in the window has been dead for 30 years. I should have listened to the realtor, not the slick, too smooth one with the practiced smile who showed me the listing, but the ancient woman who ran the corner store 2 blocks down, the one whose eyes widened like saucers when I mentioned I'd just signed the lease on 47 Willow Creek Lane. She dropped the jar of pickles she was stocking, the shatter echoing in her tiny, cluttered shop. "That house?" she'd hissed, her voice barely a whisper, her gnarled hands trembling as she wiped vinegar off the floor with a rag that looked older than the building itself. "Child, you best turn right around. That house, it's got eyes. And the one in the window, she ain't blinking for nobody." Before I could ask what she meant, she'd shooed me out, muttering about bad bones and old debts, refusing to take my money for the soda I'd picked up. I'd laughed it off. Superstitious nonsense. Desperation for affordable rent in this city makes you dismiss a lot of red flags, especially when the apartment is miraculously perfect. A spacious, sun-drenched studio on the 3rd floor of a quiet, if slightly shabby brick building for half the market rate. The landlord, a nervous, bird-like man named Mr. Henderson, had practically thrust the keys into my hands, avoiding eye contact, mumbling about cleaning the place thoroughly and keeping the shades drawn at night. I didn't think much of it. Everyone has quirks. The apartment itself was lovely, high ceilings, original hardwood floors, a large window overlooking a secluded, overgrown courtyard. It felt like a sanctuary after months of noisy roommates and crumbling studio walls. I unpacked my meager belongings, hanging my few photos, setting up my laptop on the small desk. The only oddity was the window. The previous tenant must have left the heavy velvet curtains drawn tight. I pulled them back with a flourish, eager to let in the afternoon light, and that's when I saw her. Directly across the narrow courtyard, in the window of the identical building facing mine, stood an old woman. She was impossibly thin, draped in a faded floral housecoat that hung loosely on her frame. Her white hair was pulled back in a severe bun. Her face was a road map of deep wrinkles, but her eyes were sharp, alert, and fixed directly on me, unblinkingly. She didn't wave, didn't smile, just watched. I offered a hesitant neighborly wave. Nothing, not a flicker of recognition, just that steady, unnerving gaze. I shrugged it off. Eccentric neighbor, maybe hard of hearing. I turned back to unpacking, but the feeling of being watched didn't leave. It intensified. Every time I glanced towards the window, she was there, standing in the exact same spot, in the same pose, staring. At dusk, I drew my own curtains, seeking privacy for the night. The next morning, when I opened them, she was already there, waiting. This became the pattern. Dawn, noon, dusk. She was a fixture in that window, a silent sentinel. It was unsettling, but not overtly threatening, just persistent. The first real chill came 3 days in. I was making coffee, glancing idly across the courtyard. The old woman was gone. The window was empty. A wave of relief washed over me, quickly followed by a pang of irrational guilt. Had I been rude? Too dismissive? I peered closer. The apartment beyond the window seemed dark, neglected, dusty, unlived in. That afternoon, driven by a mix of curiosity and unease, I took a walk around the block. The building opposite mine, 49 Willow Creek Lane, looked abandoned. Boards covered some lower windows. The front door was chained shut with a heavy padlock thick with rust. Mail overflowed from a cracked box. No sign of life, no sign of the old woman. Confused, I went back to my apartment. As I unlocked my door, I glanced up at 49 Willow Creek. My blood turned to ice. She was back, standing in the window, staring straight at me. Her expression seemed reproachful. How? The building was sealed shut. I ran downstairs, pounding on the chained front door of 49. No answer. I peered through a grimy ground floor window. The interior was dark, filled with shrouded furniture and layers of dust. Definitely empty. I asked a passing mail carrier. He shook his head. That place. Been vacant since Mrs. Gable died, 30 years ago last November. Heart attack, they say. Found her right there in that front room by the window. He pointed. Never rented it out since. Owner's scared of it, I reckon. Mrs. Gable, dead for 30 years. I stumbled back to my apartment, my legs weak. It was impossible. A trick of the light? A shared hallucination? But the details were too sharp, too consistent. The floral housecoat, the severe bun, the unblinking, watchful eyes. That night, I drew my curtains tight and didn't open them for 2 days. I worked from home, ordered, groceries delivered, convinced myself I'd imagined it all, a stress-induced mirage. On the third night, the power went out. A city-wide blackout, the radio said. My phone flashlight was weak, casting long, dancing shadows. I needed air. I cracked my front door, stepping into the dimly lit hallway just as the emergency lights flickered on, and I looked up. Across the courtyard, 49 Willow Creek was pitch black. All windows dark, except one, the window of the front room. It glowed with a soft, steady yellow light, like a single lamp had been turned on, and in that pool of light, standing exactly as before, was Mrs. Gable. She wasn't looking at the courtyard. She was looking directly at my building, directly at my window. Her face was pale in the lamplight, her eyes wide, her mouth slightly open, not in a scream, in an urgent, silent plea. The rational part of my brain shattered. This wasn't imagination. This was her. And she had something to say. The blackout ended, and an hour later, the light in her window vanished. She was gone. The next day, I went to the local library, digging through microfiche records. Eleanor Gable died November 12, 1993, age 78. Found alone in her apartment. No close family. The obituary was brief, but a small buried news snippet from a week later caught my eye. Police investigate impossible connection to disappearance of young woman Sarah Chen, last seen near Willow Creek Lane, October 31, 1993. Ms. Chen was reportedly seen arguing with an elderly resident described as matching Ms. Gable's description, hours before vanishing. No charges filed. Case remains open. Sarah Chen vanished. Near here, after arguing with Eleanor Gable. My stomach lurched. Was that why Mrs. Gable's ghost was trapped? Guilt? A secret? Or was she trying to tell someone? To show where Sarah was? That night, I stood by my window, curtains wide open, staring across the courtyard. I held up a handwritten sign. Crude, but clear. What do you want? Mrs. Gable appeared almost instantly, as if summoned. She didn't look at the sign. She looked at me, her eyes filled with a profound, desperate urgency. She raised a thin, trembling hand and pointed, not at me, but down towards the ground floor of her building. Then she pointed emphatically at her own chest, over her heart. She mimed digging, shoveling earth. Her mouth moved, forming silent words. Dig, here, heart. My breath fogged on the cold window pane. She wasn't pointing to a grave outside. She was pointing to the floor of her apartment, the floor where she died, where Sarah Chen might have been hidden. She wanted me to find Sarah, to give her peace, to give herself peace. The weight of it pressed down on me. The decades of silence, the burden of a secret held by a ghost, the lost girl waiting in the dark earth beneath linoleum and floorboards. I couldn't go to the police. A ghost told me to dig up a vacant building. They'd laugh me out of the station. I had to do it myself. I waited until midnight. The city was quiet. I slipped out of my building, heart pounding, and approached 49 Willow Creek. The padlock on the front door was rusted, but the chain was old. I'd brought bolt cutters. The snick of the chain parting sounded like a gunshot in the silent street. The front door groaned open on stiff hinges, releasing a wave of stale, cold air that smelled of dust, mildew, and something else. Something sickly sweet, like old flowers left to rot. Inside, it was a time capsule. Faded floral wallpaper, a threadbare armchair, a small table with a teacup, the dregs long since evaporated, leaving a dark stain. And there, by the window, a straight-back chair, the place where she died. The floorboards near it looked different, slightly raised. Newer wood, poorly matched, covered by a thin, frayed rug. I dropped to my knees, pulling the rug aside. My fingers found the edge of a loose board. It lifted easily. Underneath wasn't dirt. It was a hollow space, and nestled in the cavity, wrapped in oilcloth that was brittle with age, was a small, leather-bound journal. As I pulled it out, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath plumed white. The single bare bulb in the hallway outside the apartment door flickered on, casting long, distorted shadows. And in the doorway, filling the frame, stood Mrs. Gable, not translucent, solid, real. She wasn't wearing her housecoat. She was in a simple, old-fashioned dress, her hair neatly combed. Her eyes weren't watchful anymore. They were filled with tears. She didn't speak. She just pointed at the journal in my hands, her expression a mixture of profound sorrow and desperate hope. I didn't open it there. I couldn't. I tucked it inside my jacket, the leather cold against my skin, and fled the apartment, rechaining the door as best I could. Back in my own place, under the bright, safe light of my desk lamp, I carefully unwrapped the oilcloth. The journal belonged to Sarah Chen. The entries were frantic, scared. She'd been Eleanor Gable's home health aide. She'd discovered Eleanor's secret, a hidden cache of stolen jewelry, heirlooms she'd taken from previous elderly tenants she'd cared for, tenants who had died under suspicious circumstances. Sarah had threatened to go to the police. The last entry, dated October 30th, 1993, was chilling. She knows I know. She's watching me all the time. Says if I tell, she'll say I stole it. She's got a place under the floor. She showed me. Said it's where troubles disappear. I'm so scared I have to get out tonight. Eleanor hadn't killed Sarah. She'd hidden her alive, buried her under the floor. The journal didn't say. But the implication was clear. Eleanor's guilt wasn't for murder, but for imprisonment, for letting fear and greed trap a young woman in the dark for 30 years. I knew what I had to do. I called the police first. Thing in the morning, anonymous, giving only the address and the words. Check under the floorboards near the window. You'll find Sarah Chen's journal, and maybe more. I hung up before they could trace the call. I watched from my window as police cars and a forensics van arrived at 49 Willow Creek. They broke down the door. Hours passed. Then a body bag was brought out. Not one, two, smaller, wrapped separately. Dental records, they'd confirmed Sarah Chen. The second body, older, female, Eleanor Gable. She hadn't died of a heart attack in her chair. She'd died down there in the dark with her secret. Had she gone down herself, consumed by guilt? Or had something else claimed her in the end? The news reported the discovery. The stolen jewelry was found hidden in a wall cavity. Mrs. Gable was posthumously charged in Sarah's kidnapping and imprisonment. The case was closed. Justice of a sort. That night, I opened my curtains. The window across the courtyard was dark, empty. Mrs. Gable was gone. The oppressive feeling of being watched had vanished. The apartment felt lighter, quieter, in a peaceful way. I thought it was over. I could finally breathe. I was wrong. 3 nights later, I woke to a soft tap, tap, tap on my window. Not rain, delicate, insistent, like fingernails. I sat up, dread coiling in my stomach. I didn't want to look, but I had to. Slowly, I turned toward the window. She was there, Sarah Chen, young, pale, her eyes wide with the same terror that filled her journal's final pages. She wasn't looking at me. She was looking down at the ground far below, her hands pressed against the glass as if trying to push through. Her mouth moved silently. Get me out. The floor under Eleanor's apartment wasn't the only grave, the courtyard soil itself. It held secrets. Eleanor had lied in her final ghostly plea. She'd pointed to her heart, to the floor, to distract. The real prison, the real grave was outside. And Sarah's spirit, freed from the suffocating dark under the floorboards, was now trapped above her own earthly remains, unable to move on, unable to find peace until her bones were found. The tapping grew louder, more frantic. Sarah's face pressed harder against the glass, her eyes now fixed on me, filled with a new desperate plea. You found a journal. You found her. Now find me. I sank back onto my bed, the weight of the house's history crushing me. The old woman in the window had been dead for 30 years, but her crime had chained another soul to this place, and now that soul was looking to me, the witness, the finder of secrets. The tapping didn't stop. It echoed in the silent room, a metronome counting down the seconds until I faced the truth buried in the soil below my window. The courtyard wasn't just overgrown, it was a cemetery, and Sarah Chen was still waiting. The old woman's guilt was absolved, but the debt remained, and I was the only one who could pay it. I pulled my knees to my chest, watching Sarah's pale face in the glass, her silent tears fogging the pain. The digging hadn't ended. It had just begun, and the next grave was mine to find. The tapping softened, became a whisper against the glass. Help me. I closed my eyes. The courtyard waited. The earth held its breath. And I knew I wouldn't sleep again until I turned its dark soil, searching for the bones of the girl who never came home. The old woman was gone, but her shadow stretched long, and it had fallen squarely on me. The window wasn't just a view anymore. It was a mirror reflecting a debt I couldn't refuse. Sarah's eyes held mine through the glass, a silent promise. You see me? Now set me free. And I knew, with a cold certainty that seeped into my bones, that I would, even if it meant digging until my own hands bled in the haunted earth of Willow Creek Lane. The tapping stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. It was the silence of the grave, waiting to be opened. I got out of bed. I had a shovel to find. As this story comes to rest a new whisper begins. The portrait in the attic changes its expression every night. The inheritance came with keys and caveats. My great-aunt Eleanor's lawyer handed me the deed to Willowwood House, a sprawling shingled Victorian on the edge of a dying New England town, with a handshake that lingered a second too long. "She left it to you specifically," he said, his voice dry as attic dust. "Said you were the only one who'd understand its moods." He wouldn't elaborate, just slid a rusted key across his desk. "The attic door sticks. Use the spare key for it. And whatever you do, don't disturb the portrait on the east wall. It's not yours to touch." When I asked why, he simply adjusted his glasses, the lenses flashing opaque. "Some doors," he murmured, "are best left closed." Willowwood smelled of beeswax and buried time. Sunlight strained through grimy leaded windows, illuminating dust motes dancing above threadbare Persian rugs and velvet drapes heavy with mildew. The air hung still and cold even in late September, carrying the faint, sweet decay of dried roses and old paper. Eleanor had lived alone for 40 years after my grandfather's death, and the silence had seeped into the floorboards, the wainscoting, the very marrow of the house. I moved in on a Tuesday, hauling boxes of my meager belongings up the creaking front stairs. The realtor had mentioned the attic was full of character. What she didn't mention was the door. It was at the end of the second-floor hallway, taller than the others, made of dark, unvarnished oak. No knob, just a tarnished iron latch. The key the lawyer gave me fit stiffly. When I turned it, the lock released with a groan like a stone grinding over bone. The door swung inward slowly, revealing steep, narrow stairs vanishing into gloom. A wave of cold air rushed out, carrying the sharp, acrid scent of oil paint and turpentine, utterly alien in the dust-thick stillness of the rest of the house. I flicked on the bare bulb dangling from the rafters. Weak light spilled over stacks of steamer trunks, draped sheet-covered furniture, and mountains of yellowed newspapers. And there, on the east wall, covered by a heavy canvas drop-cloth, was the portrait. I didn't touch it, not that first day. I just stood at the top of the stairs, the cold seeping through my sweater, listening to the silence. It wasn't empty silence. It was watchful. That night, I woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of scratching, not mice, deliberate, rhythmic, like fingernails dragging slowly down wood. It came from above, from the attic. I lay frozen, listening until dawn painted the ceiling pale gray. The scratching stopped exactly as the first light touched the window. The next afternoon, curiosity overpowered caution. I climbed the attic stairs, the cold deepening with each step. I stood before the draped portrait, heart pounding. "It's just a painting," I told myself. Aunt Eleanor's odd taste. I gripped the edge of the canvas. Cloth. It felt unnaturally heavy, damp with cold. I yanked it down. The frame was ornate, tarnished silver. The painting itself was arresting. A woman in a high-collared Edwardian gown, seated in a carved wooden chair. Late 20s, maybe. Dark hair pulled severely back, eyes wide set, intelligent, but holding a sadness that seemed to bleed through the varnish. Her lips were pressed in a neutral line. The background was a blurred landscape of willow trees weeping into a twilight lake. The artist's signature was smudged in the corner. A. Thorne, 1898 Os. I studied it for 10 minutes, noting the meticulous brushstrokes, the lifelike sheen on the woman's skin. Nothing unusual, just an old portrait. I recovered it with the drop cloth, The smell of turpentine sharpened my nostrils and went downstairs. I woke the next night to the scratching again, but this time, beneath it, a sound that stopped my breath, a low, muffled sob. Not human, not animal. A vibration in the air, itself like wood weeping. I didn't go upstairs. I locked my bedroom door and pressed my ear to the floorboards until dawn. In the morning, I climbed back to the attic. The drop cloth lay crumpled on the floor. The portrait was uncovered. I stared. The woman's expression had changed. Her lips were no longer neutral. They curved upward at the corners, a faint, almost imperceptible smile, but her eyes, they were wider, brighter, and filled with a quiet, unnerving hunger. I backed down the stairs, cold sweat on my neck. Impossible. Must have knocked the cloth off last time. Trick of the light. But the turpentine smell was stronger now, clinging to my clothes. The changes escalated. Night after night, I'd find the drop cloth discarded, the portrait uncovered, its expression shifting with the moon. Tuesday, tears like liquid pearls tracing paths down her cheeks, her mouth open in a silent wail. Wednesday, eyes narrowed in suspicion, head tilted as if listening. Thursday, a full, radiant smile that didn't touch her cold, black pupils. Friday, lips drawn back in a snarl, revealing just the hint of sharp, yellowed teeth. Each time, the turpentine scent grew thicker, sharper, until it coated my tongue. Each time, the cold in the attic deepened, frosting the dust on the trunks. I tried recovering it. I pinned the drop cloth down with thumbtacks. I wedged a chair under the attic door handle. Nothing worked. Every morning, the cloth was on the floor. The chair was back in the corner. The portrait was uncovered. Watching, waiting, I researched. The town library's local history section held a brittle newspaper clipping from October 3rd, 1898. Local artist Alastair Thorne commits suicide after wife's mysterious disappearance. The article was brief. Thorne, a respected portraitist, had reported his wife, Clara, missing after she failed to return from a walk along Willowwood Lake. Weeks later, Thorne was found in his studio, wrists slit, surrounded by half-finished portraits of Clara, all showing her with expressions of terror. The police suspected foul play but found no body. The case went cold. The house, Willowwood, was sold. Clara Thorne. The name echoed in the silent house. I stared at the portrait's latest change. Last night, her hand had lifted from her lap. One pale finger pointed directly at the attic stairs. That night, the scratching stopped. Instead, I heard singing. A woman's voice, clear and sweet as a bell, drifting down the hallway. It was an old lullaby my mother used to sing. "Hush now, baby. Don't say a word. Papa's gonna buy you a mockingbird." But the words were twisted, slowed, the melody souring into something mournful and wrong. I pressed my palms over my ears, but the voice wasn't outside. It was inside my head. Cold seeped under my bedroom door, pooling around my feet like water. The singing grew louder, closer. Then, abruptly, silence. I found the message at dawn, scrawled in what looked like dried mud on my bathroom mirror. Let me out. She didn't jump. Panic became my constant companion. I stopped sleeping. I taped the attic door shut. I bought sage and burned it until my eyes watered, chanting prayers I didn't believe in. The house absorbed it all. The cold spots multiplied. Drawers opened by themselves. The lullaby hummed in the walls. And every morning the attic door was unlocked, the tape torn cleanly aside, The portrait uncovered, Clara's expression now one of desperate pleading, tears streaking the dusty varnish. Her pointing finger wasn't aimed at the stairs anymore. It pointed straight at me. I called the lawyer. He refused to speak of Clara Thorne. "Burn the portrait," he hissed down the phone, his voice tight with fear. "Burn it and scatter the ashes in the lake. Don't look back." When I asked why he hadn't done it himself, he went silent for a long moment. "I tried," he whispered, 20 years ago. The fire wouldn't take. The frame turned black, but the canvas, it stayed clean. And after the knocking started in my walls, I moved 3 times. It always finds me. I gave you the house to save myself. Forgive me." He hung up. That night, the power died. Not just in the house, in the whole street. Moonlight bled through my window, painting the room in shades of bone. The singing started again, louder now, coming from the hallway, not the lullaby. A new song, a dirge. Heavy footsteps climbed the stairs, slow, deliberate, too heavy for a woman. Thud, 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 stopping outside my door. The knob rattled, not violently, patiently, testing. I backed into the corner, clutching a fireplace poker, tears freezing on my cheeks. The cold radiating from under the door was arctic. The singing shifted, Clara's voice now layered with another, a man's voice, guttural, furious. "Mine," it growled beneath her melody. "Always mine. The lake took one, but the house keeps the other. Come out, little bird. Let Papa see you." The door handle turned. The lock held, for now. But the wood around it began to splinter. Fine cracks spiderwebbed across the surface. Moonlight caught the edge of a shadow beneath the door. A man's boot, polished and black, resting on the threshold. The singing swelled. Clara's voice now a scream inside my skull. "He didn't let me jump. He pushed. He painted me while I screamed." I ran, not to the front door. The shadow was there too, tall and broad-shouldered, blocking the exit. I ran up to the attic. It was the only door not yet breached. I threw the latch open, stumbling up the icy stairs, slamming the door behind me. I jammed the spare key into the lock, twisting it hard. Below, the splintering stopped. The singing ceased. An unnatural silence fell. I stood in the attic's freezing dark, breathing hard. Moonlight streamed through the dormer window, illuminating the uncovered portrait. Clara's face was transformed. No sorrow, no fear, pure, radiant fury. Her eyes blazed like coals. Her mouth was open in a silent roar, and her hand wasn't pointing anymore. Both arms were outstretched, palms upturned, as if pushing against an invisible barrier. The turpentine smell was suffocating. Paint fumes stung my eyes. Then I saw it. Behind her, in the painted willow trees, the background had changed. No longer a lake, a dark, churning hole in the earth, ringed with grasping skeletal hands, and standing at its edge, half fused with the shadows, was a man in a painter's smock. Alistair Thorne. His face was a rictus of rage, one hand gripping Clara's wrist in the painting, the other holding a palette knife, dripping black paint. But his eyes, they weren't fixed on Clara. They were staring out of the canvas, staring directly at me. The attic door shuddered, not from the latch, from the inside. Something heavy slammed against it once, twice. Wood cracked. Moonlight caught the edge of a black boot pressing through the splintered gap. Clara's painted eyes flicked toward the door. Her expression shifted again, not fear, but resolve. She turned fully toward the breach, her outstretched hands now aimed at the intruder. The turpentine smell turned acrid, burning. The air crackled. Frost spread rapidly across the floorboards toward the door, crawling up the splintering wood. I understood then. She wasn't trapped in the portrait. She was trapped guarding it, keeping him contained. The scratches, the sobs, the changing expressions, they weren't hauntings. They were battles. Every night Alistair fought to break free. Every night Clara held him back. But she was weakening. And my grief, my loneliness after my mother's death, my raw, open sorrow when I first moved in, had been a feast for him. He'd smelled it like blood and water. He'd been using me to erode her hold. The lullaby wasn't just Clara's voice. It was his lure, mimicking the comfort I craved, drawing me closer to the door he needed me to open. The door exploded inward. Alistair stood in the frame, not a ghost, but a thing of shadow and dried paint. His form flickered, peeling like old wallpaper, revealing glimpses of bone and river silt beneath. His eyes were pits of darkness. In his hand, the palette knife gleamed. He didn't look at me. His gaze was fixed on Clara's portrait, on the hole in the painted earth. "Mine," he rasped, the sound like gravel in a tin can. "Time to come home, my sweet." He stepped forward. Clara's painted form rippled. Her outstretched hands glowed with a faint, silvery light. Frost shot from her fingertips, encasing Alistair's boots in ice. He snarled, shaking it off, advancing. The temperature plummeted. My breath fogged thickly. The painting surface began to bubble, the varnish cracking like ice on a pond. I didn't think. I ran not away, but toward the portrait, toward Clara. I pressed my palms flat against the cold canvas, right over her heart. "I'm sorry," I sobbed, the words ripped from me. "I'm so sorry for your pain. I'm sorry I let him use mine. You don't have to hold him alone anymore. Let go. Let go." A shock wave of cold tore through me, not painful, cleansing. Clara's painted eyes met mine. For a heartbeat, I saw not pigment and canvas, but a woman, real, terrified, unbearably sad. Then her expression softened, not into peace, into release. She lowered her hands. Alistair roared, lunging for the painting. But Clara stepped out of the frame, not as a ghost, as a ripple of moonlight and frost. She flowed between Alistair and the portrait, her form shimmering, insubstantial, yet radiating fierce warmth. She didn't fight him. She embraced him, her arms wrapped around his shadowy form. He struggled, snarling, the palette knife plunging into her light, but it passed through, harmless. "No more, Alistair," her voice whispered, not in my ears, but in my bones. "No more pain, no more painting the dark." They began to dissolve, not fading, unmaking. Alistair's rage turned to confusion, then a childlike sob as the shadows peeled away, revealing the broken man beneath. Clara's light grew brighter, warmer, pulling him into its glow. The hole in the painted landscape sealed itself, replaced by the willow trees and the calm, moonlit lake. The turpentine smell vanished, replaced by the scent of dew on grass. As they faded, Clara turned her head toward me. One last look, not sadness, gratitude. Then, with a sound like a sigh through willow branches, they were gone. Silence. The attic was just an attic again. Dusty, cold, but naturally so. Dawn light seeped through the dormer window, illuminating the portrait on the east wall. It showed Clara Thorne seated calmly in her chair. Her expression was serene, peaceful. Her hands rested gently in her lap. The background was a perfect, undisturbed lake at twilight. The signature in... The corner was clear now. Clara Thorne, 1901. I took the portrait down, not to destroy it, to hang it in the sunniest room in the house, the morning room overlooking the garden. I cleaned the glass, polished the frame. Every day I sit with my coffee beneath it, watching the light shift across Clara's face. She never changes now. She just is, calm, present. The house is quiet, truly quiet. The cold spots are gone, the scratching, the singing, the feeling of being watched. They vanished. But sometimes, on still evenings when the willows sway by the lake, I catch a scent on the breeze, not turpentine, wild roses. And if I listen very closely, beneath the wind and the leaves, I hear two voices, not singing, just breathing, together. I leave the attic door unlocked now, but I never go up there. Some doors, I've learned, are best left closed, and some portraits aren't meant to be kept in the dark. Clara earned her peace. I won't disturb it, but on the hardest days, when grief for my mother feels like a stone in my chest, I still press my palm to the glass of her portrait. Warmth always blooms beneath my fingers, and in the quiet, I swear I feel the faintest pressure against my hand, like a thank you, like a promise. You're not alone. The house holds its breath. The willows whisper. And for the first time since I arrived, I believe it. And that ends this story. A new one starts now. The previous owner buried something under the floorboards, and it's awake. The realtor's smile didn't reach her eyes when she handed me the keys. "Hickory House is a steal at this price," she chirped, her manicured nails tapping the listing sheet. $800 a month for 3 bedrooms? In this market? She wouldn't meet my gaze, focusing instead on adjusting her scarf. Mr. Armitage was a private man, eccentric. Passed quietly in his sleep last winter, left everything just as is. She paused at the front gate, the overgrown hydrangeas scraping against her designer coat. One thing, he kept the master bedroom locked, said it was resting. The key's in the kitchen drawer. Use it if you must, but... She trailed off, glancing at the sagging porch roof. Some doors are better left unopened, especially after dark. I didn't ask why. I just nodded, the weight of my medical bills heavy in my chest. My daughter Lily's asthma medication didn't care about haunted houses. Hickory House smelled of dust and damp wool the moment I pushed open the front door. Not the cozy scent of an old home, but the stale, hollow breath of abandonment. Sunlight strained through grimy windows, illuminating motes dancing above furniture draped in yellowed sheets. The air hung unnaturally still, thick as cold syrup, carrying an underlying sweetness like forgotten apples left to rot in a cellar. The master bedroom door at the end of the hall was indeed locked, a heavy oak slab with a tarnished brass keyhole. I found the key exactly where she said, bottom drawer of the kitchen cabinet, tucked beneath a stack of mildewed cookbooks. It turned with a gritty click that echoed too loudly in the silence. The room was frozen in time. 1970s floral wallpaper peeled at the seams. A 4-poster bed stood stripped bare, its mattress stained with dark, irregular patches. But the floor was wrong. The wide pine planks near the closet were newer than the rest, patched. Haphazardly, the wood grain mismatched, the nails driven in at odd angles. One board near the baseboard was slightly raised, as if something beneath it had shifted. Kneeling, I ran my fingers along the seam. The wood felt unnaturally cold, And there was a smell, not dust or mildew, but wet earth and the faint metallic tang of old blood. Taped beneath the raised board was a folded sheet of paper. The handwriting was spidery, frantic, the ink blotted as if written in shaking haste. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't rats. Don't listen to the scratching. Don't listen to the voice. It mimics. It remembers warmth. I buried it deep under the floorboards after the fever took Martha. I thought the cold would hold it. I was wrong. It's learning the shape of loneliness. It's learning you. Don't let it taste your tears. Don't let it hear your child cry. It hungers for the spaces between heartbeats. I tried to salt the seams. I tried iron nails. It only makes it angrier. God, forgive me. I let it have the dog first. Then the sparrows. Now it wants bigger warmth. It wants her laugh. Don't open the floor. Don't open the floor. Don't open the... The note ended in a jagged tear. My throat closed. Lily's laugh, bright and sudden as a bird song, echoed from the living room where she played with her stuffed rabbit. I shoved the note into my pocket, heart hammering. Eccentric, the realtor had called him. Resting. I slammed the bedroom door shut, turning the key until it bit into my thumb. For 3 days, I told myself it was dementia, ramblings of a grieving old man. I aired out rooms, scrubbed grime from windows, filled the house with the smell of lemon cleaner and boiling cinnamon to mask the underlying decay. I avoided the master bedroom. I slept on the living room couch with Lily tucked against my side, her small breaths warm on my neck. The scratching started on the 4th night, not from the walls, from under. The floorboards, near the couch, a slow, deliberate scritch, 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 like fingernails on wood. Lily stirred, her breathing catching in that telltale wheeze. I held her tighter, rocking, humming, until her breaths smoothed. The scratching stopped, but as I carried her back to her room at dawn, I saw it, a thin line of damp, dark earth seeping from beneath the master bedroom door. I called the realtor. Her phone went straight to voicemail. I called the utility company claiming a gas leak to get a repairman out. The old man in coveralls poked around the basement tapping the pipes. "No leaks, ma'am," he said, wiping his hands on a rag. "But this house, it's got bad bones. Foundation settling uneven. See that?" He pointed to a hairline crack snaking up the basement wall, filled with a substance that looked like packed mud, not concrete. Old-timers used to pack earth in the cracks. Superstition. Said it kept the night things out. He chuckled, but his eyes darted toward the stairs. Though I wouldn't know about that. Just patch it with mortar, I'd say. He left without touching it. That afternoon, while Lily napped, I pried up the raised floorboard in the master bedroom. The wood splintered easily. Beneath it, the earth was black and slick, smelling of river clay and iron, and there were things buried in it, not bones, not artifacts, offerings. A child's porcelain doll with one eye gouged out, a rusted horseshoe bent inward, a mason jar filled with coarse gray salt, and a small leather-bound journal. I took only the journal, resealing the floor with trembling hands, the damp earth clinging to my fingers like cold sweat. Armitage's journal wasn't about ghosts. It was about hunger. Page after page detailed a presence he called the root, not a spirit, but something older, something that slumbered in the earth beneath the house, awakened by grief. It didn't want souls. It wanted the echoes of life, the warmth of a shared meal, the vibration of laughter, the salt of tears. It fed on absence. When his wife Martha died, her loneliness had been a feast. He'd tried to starve it, locking himself in silence, avoiding human contact, but it learned to mimic. It learned to call. March 12th, 1978. It spoke in Martha's voice last night. "Silas, the window's open. I'm cold." I almost went to her. God help me, I almost opened the floor. April 3rd, 1978. Buried the dog today. Poor Buster wouldn't stop whining at the master door. The root took his warmth. His body was stiff as stone, frozen solid in July heat. I put him in the hole with salt and iron nails. It only made the scratching louder. May the 17th, 1978. It's learning Lily's name. Not my Lily, God rest her, but the little girl next door. It heard me sighing over their laughter. It whispered, "Bring her to me. Her joy is so bright." I poured boiling water on the floorboards. The smell of burnt earth filled the room. It laughed. It sounded like stones grinding together. I burned the journal in the backyard fire pit that night, the pages curling into ash that smelled of burnt hair. I bought salt and iron nails from the hardware store, sprinkling the salt along the baseboards of the master bedroom, hammering nails into the floor seams until my palms blistered. Lily watched me, her small face serious. "Mommy, why's the house sad?" she asked, her voice tight, with another impending wheeze. "It's not sad, sweetheart," I lied, pulling her close. "Just old." The root ignored the salt. It ignored the iron. That night, as Lily coughed in her sleep, a new sound joined the scratching. A low, wet gurgle, like mud bubbling in a spring thaw, and a voice, thin as spider silk, slithered under my bedroom door. Warm, so warm, the little light, let me taste it. Lily's breathing hitched into a full asthma attack. Her inhaler was empty. I fumbled for the phone, no signal. The landline was dead. The gurgling grew louder, closer, seeming to rise from the floor beneath my feet. The temperature plummeted. Frost bloomed across the window pane in jagged, black-veined patterns. In the moonlight, I saw it, a shape coalescing from the shadows near the closet, not solid, but a shifting mass of damp earth and root fibers, with two pits of cold light where eyes should be. It reached a limb like a gnarled tree root toward Lily's bed. I grabbed the iron fireplace poker, swinging wildly. It passed through the shape like smoke, but the thing recoiled with a hiss like steam on hot stone. The frost retreated. The gurgling faded. Lily's breathing slowed. Dawn found me slumped against her door, the poker still clutched in white-knuckled hands, the smell of wet earth thick in the air. I packed our bags that morning, called a cab. But as I carried Lily's suitcase to the porch, the front gate was chained shut, not locked. Chained, with thick, rusted links that hadn't been there. Yesterday, the cab driver honked impatiently, then drove away, shaking his head. My phone had one bar. I called 911. The dispatcher's voice crackled, distant. "Ma'am, we show no address for Hickory House on Elm Street. That property's been condemned since '79. Uninhabitable. Structural collapse risk." The line went dead. Trapped. The root grew bolder. It stopped hiding. During the day, dark, viscous mud seeped from the floor seams in the master bedroom, spreading like spilled ink across the hallway. At night, the gurgling became a chorus, a wet churning sound that vibrated in my teeth. It learned Lily's routines. When she sang in the bathtub, the pipes would shudder and the water would run thick and brown for an hour after. When she laughed at cartoons, the TV static would resolve into a distorted image, a face made of roots and mud, mouth open in a silent scream of hunger. The voice no longer mimicked Martha or Lily. It used my voice now, my exhaustion, my fear. "You can't save her," it whispered as I tucked Lily in. "Her lungs are weak, like your mother's, like Martha's. Let me warm her. I can make the coughing stop. Just open the floor, just a crack." Lily's breathing grew shallower. Her inhaler was useless. Her pediatrician's office had no record of her. No ambulance came when I called. I sat with her on a couch, rocking, watching the mud seep slowly toward us across the floorboards. The air smelled of decay and wet stone. The root's voice was a constant hum beneath the silence. "She's fading. Cold is coming. I can hold the cold back. I can hold her." Desperation is a dangerous thing. That night, while Lily slept fitfully, I stood before the master bedroom door. The lock felt warm in my hand, not comforting, hungry. I turned the key. The room stank of opened graves. The floorboards near the closet were buckled upward, earth oozing between the cracks. The gurgling was deafening here, a wet, sucking sound from deep below. I pried up the centerboard with the fireplace poker. The hole gaped wide, dark as a throat. Cold, damp air washed over me, and the voice, not whispering now, but crooning in my own exhausted tone. "Yes, yes, bring her warmth, feed the cold. She won't suffer. I'll keep her safe, always safe." I almost believed it. Lily's wheezing echoed from the living room, the promise of quiet, of peace. I took a step toward the hole. Then I saw it, a small white shape, half buried in the mud at the bottom. Lily's stuffed rabbit, the one she'd been playing with the day we moved in, the one that had vanished from her bed last Tuesday. It was coated in slime, one button eye missing. The root had taken it. It was learning her. Rage burned through the despair. This thing didn't want to save Lily. It wanted to replace her, to feed on the hollow space her death would leave. I slammed the floorboard back down, hammering it shut with the poker, until my arms ached. The gurgling turned to a shriek, a sound of tearing roots and crushing stone. The house shook. Plaster rained from the ceiling. In the living room, Lily screamed. I ran to her. She was sitting up in bed, eyes wide with terror, pointing at the corner. The mud wasn't just on the floor anymore. It was climbing. The walls, forming thick, root-like tendrils that pulsed with a sickly, greenish light. One tendril snaked toward Lily's nightstand, wrapping around her half-full glass of water. The water blackened instantly. The tendril retracted, dripping viscous fluid into the hole beneath the floorboards, feeding it. The voice boomed now, shaking the windows. "She is mine. The warmth is mine. You cannot keep her from the deep." The mud surged across the floor, cold as a winter river, reaching for Lily's bare feet. I grabbed her, clutching her to my chest, backing into the hallway. The front door was chained. The windows were sealed with a film of black, glistening mold. The only escape was the basement. I'd never been down there. Armitage's journal had called it the root's throat. The basement door in the mudroom was warped shut, the frame swollen with damp. I kicked it open, splinters flying. Dank, frigid air rushed out. Stone steps descended into utter blackness. Lily buried her face in my shoulder, coughing weakly. The mud was at our heels, rising in a slow, deliberate tide up the hallway. The gurgling was a roar now, filling the house, shaking the light bulbs until they shattered. I stumbled down the basement steps, the darkness swallowing us whole. My foot hit a switch. A single bare bulb flickered on, illuminating a nightmare. The walls weren't stone. They were made of roots, thick, black, pulsing veins that throbbed with that same sickly green light. They covered every surface, converging on a central mass in the far corner, a mound of writhing roots taller than me, slick with mud, studded with broken dolls, rusted nails and clumps of human hair. At its heart, 2 pits glowed with cold fire, the root's core. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, vibrating in my bones. You cannot hide the warmth. I smell her fear, I smell her breath. Give her to the deep, or I will take her cold. The roots on the walls lashed like whips, cracking against the stone floor. One wrapped around my ankle, icy and strong as iron. I fell, Lily tumbling from my arms. She landed near the root mound, gasping, her small chest heaving. The core pulsed brighter, the cold light reflecting in her terrified eyes. A thick root uncoiled from the mound, sliding toward her face, drawn to her warmth. I fought the root binding my ankle, the cold seeping into my bones, slowing my blood. Lily's name tore from my throat, a raw animal sound. The root hissed, recoiling slightly. Sadness, it breathed, the voice thick with ecstasy. Sweet, bitter sadness, feed me more. It was feeding on my fear, my grief, my love for her. That was its true sustenance, not her body, the hollow space her loss would carve in me. I stopped fighting. Let the cold take my leg. I crawled toward Lily, not away from the root, but toward it. Tears streamed down my face, hot against the unnatural chill. I didn't think of losing her. I thought of her. Her stubborn chin when she refused vegetables. The way she hummed off key in the bathtub. How she'd pressed her small hand to my cheek last week when I cried over bills and whispered, "It's okay, Mommy. I love you loud." I reached Lily, pulling her into my lap, wrapping my arms around her shuddering body. I buried my face in her hair, breathing in the scent of baby shampoo and sweat. And I let the tears come, not tears of fear, tears of love, fierce, defiant, warm tears. I wept for her future birthdays, for her scraped knees, for the first day of school I'd never see. I wept for the life she deserved, not the death this thing craved. I poured every ounce of my love into those tears, a shield of pure human warmth. The root shrieked, a sound of tearing earth and splintering wood. The green light in its core flickered violently. The roots binding my ankle loosened, shriveling like burnt paper. The mud receded from the walls, dripping back into the cracks. The cold lessened, replaced by a fragile, ordinary chill. Lily's coughing eased. Her breathing deepened into exhausted sleep against my shoulder. Silence. The basement bulb flickered out. Moonlight filtered through a high, grimy window, illuminating the root mound. It was smaller now, duller. The pulsing light reduced to a faint ember glow. The voice was a dry rustle, weak, but still present. The warmth, it burns, but the hunger remains. I carried Lily upstairs. The house was quiet. No scratching, no gurgling. The mud on the floors was dry, crumbly dust. I locked the basement door with 3 new deadbolts. I sealed the master bedroom floorboards with industrial adhesive, then covered them with a heavy rug. I salted every windowsill. I hung iron nails above every door frame. It's not over, I know that. The root is weakened, not gone. It sleeps. But it dreams of warmth, of Lily's laughter, of my tears. Lily's asthma is better. The doctors call it a miracle. I don't correct them. At night, when she sleeps soundly in a new room, the farthest from the master bedroom, I sit on the living room rug, my back against the sealed basement door. I listen, not for scratching, for breathing. The house breathes now, slow, deep, like something ancient settling back into slumber. Sometimes, when the moon is full, I smell wet earth, and a voice, faint as a dying ember, whispers from the floorboards, "Warmth. Remember? Warmth." I don't answer. I just hold Lily tighter and wait, because I know what Armitage learned too late. You can't starve a hunger like this. You can only feed it something else. Something that doesn't cost a life. I feed it my memories of Martha Armitage's laugh, of Silas's stubborn hope, of the sparrows that used to nest in the eaves. I feed it the warmth of every kind word, every shared meal with neighbors who finally returned my calls, every sunrise over Hickory House's overgrown garden. It's not enough to sate it, but it's enough to keep it sleeping. The realtor called last week. "Heard you're staying," she said, her voice tight. "Good, the house needs a keeper." There was no smile in her words, only relief. She knows. They all know on Elm Street. They leave baskets of vegetables on my porch. They don't ask why I keep salt in my pockets, why I never open the basement door, why I rock Lily to sleep in the living room every night, my back pressed against the sealed wood. Last Tuesday, Lily brought me a dandelion from the garden. "For the sad house, Mommy," she said, her eyes clear, her breath steady. I took it, placed it on the sealed trapdoor to the basement. That night, the whisper was softer, almost gentle. Yellow, like sun, like her hair. I didn't smile, but I didn't flinch. I tucked Lily in, kissed her forehead, and sat down on the rug by the basement door. I closed my eyes, and I remembered. Not the fear, the warmth, the stubborn, flickering warmth of a little girl who brought a dandelion to a hungry dark. The house held its breath. And for now, that's enough. This is where the story ends. Let's continue with the next. The room the hotel staff refuses to clean after midnight. I should have known better than to take the room on the 7th floor. The sign outside the Grand Riverview Hotel, a name that hadn't been accurate since the river changed course 50 years ago, flickered erratically, casting sickly yellow pulses over the cracked sidewalk. My bank account was bleeding red, the kind of red that makes you ignore the peeling paint on the lobby doors, and the way the night clerk, a man with deep circles under his eyes who introduced himself only as Luis, barely looked up from his dog-eared paperback. The rate was absurdly cheap, almost insultingly so for a city where studio apartments cost more than my old car. "7th floor," Luis mumbled, sliding a heavy old-fashioned brass key across the scarred oak counter. Not a key card, a real key. "Room 713, elevator slow, stairs are, well, they're there." He finally met my eyes, his expression unreadable. "Checkout's at 11. Don't be late." There was a pause, a flicker in his gaze that might have been pity or maybe just exhaustion. "And housekeeping doesn't service that floor after midnight. Policy." He shrugged, turning back to his book before I could ask why. The unspoken "don't ask" hung thick in the dusty air. The elevator groaned like a dying animal as it ascended, the overhead light flickering with each shuddering halt between floors. The 7th floor hallway was a world apart from the dimly lit, but relatively clean lobby. The carpet, once a deep burgundy, was worn threadbare in patches, revealing stained plywood underneath. The pattern was obscured by decades of tracked-in grime. The air smelled faintly of mildew and something else, a sharp, chemical tang like ammonia, but underneath it, the cloying sweetness of decay like forgotten fruit left to rot in a damp cupboard. The fluorescent lights buzzed incessantly, casting a sickly, uneven glow that made the shadows in the corners seem deeper, more solid. There were only 4 doors visible down the short corridor, each painted a chipped institutional green. 713 was at the very end, next to a service closet with a padlock hanging open, revealing empty shelves coated in dust. The key turned with a gritty resistance. The door opened with a long, low creak that echoed in the silent hall. My first impression was of oppressive stillness. The room itself was small, dominated by a narrow, unmade bed with a thin, lumpy mattress. Faded floral wallpaper peeled away from the corners of the ceiling, revealing patches of water-stained plaster beneath. A single, bare bulb hung from a chain over a scarred wooden desk. The window, overlooking a grimy air shaft in the brick wall of the adjacent building, was grimy and wouldn't budge more than an inch. The bathroom door was slightly ajar, revealing cracked tiles and a rust-stained sink. It was cheap, depressing, and exactly what I could afford. I dropped my duffel bag, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet, and tried to ignore the way the shadows seemed to cling to the corners of the ceiling. The first night was uneventful, just the unfamiliar creaks and groans of an old building settling, the distant muffled sounds of traffic from the street far below. I slept fitfully, the thin mattress offering little comfort. The second night, I woke abruptly at 2:17 a.m., not from a dream, but from a sound, a soft, rhythmic scritch, 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 like fingernails slowly dragging across wood. It came from the bathroom. I lay frozen, heart hammering against my ribs, straining my ears. The sound stopped. Silence. Just the hum of the ancient radiator under the window. I told myself it was rats. Old buildings have rats. But the sound hadn't been frantic scratching. It had been deliberate, almost patient. The next morning, I mentioned it casually to Marta, the only housekeeper I saw, a small woman with tired eyes who was vacuuming the third-floor hallway. She stopped. The machine, her hand tightening on the handle. "Room 713?" she asked, her voice low. When I nodded, her eyes darted away. "Old pipes," she said quickly, too quickly. "This building, it talks. Pay no mind." She restarted the vacuum with unnecessary force, the roar filling the hallway, a clear dismissal. I noticed she didn't have her cart with her. It was parked further down the hall, conspicuously empty of cleaning supplies. That afternoon, exploring the room more thoroughly, I found something tucked behind a loose baseboard near the bed. A small, water-stained photograph. It showed a young woman, maybe early 20s, smiling shyly at the camera. She had dark, wavy hair and kind eyes. On her back in faded blue ink, Eleanor, summer, 78. I tucked it into my wallet, a strange pang of melancholy hitting me. Who was she? Why was her picture hidden in this forgotten room? Night 3. The scritch, scritch, scritch returned, louder this time, unmistakably coming from the bathroom door. It wasn't nails on wood anymore. It sounded like something was slowly, deliberately scratching on the inside of the door. I lay rigid, sweat cooling on my skin. The sound stopped. Then a new sound, a soft, wet drip, drip, drip from the bathroom sink. I hadn't turned on the tap. The dripping grew louder, more insistent, echoing in the small space. I fumbled for my phone, the screen blinding in the darkness. 3:03 a.m. I forced myself out of bed, my bare feet cold on the gritty floor. I grasped the doorknob. It was icy cold. I turned it slowly, pushing the door open. The bathroom light flickered on with a sputter. The sink was dry, bone dry, no leak, no water anywhere. But the smell hit me immediately. That same cloying sweetness of decay, mixed now with the sharp, coppery tang of blood. My stomach lurched. The mirror above the sink was fogged, as if someone had just taken a hot shower, but the air was cold. And in the condensation, written in a shaky, uneven hand, were 3 words: "Don't look back." I slammed the door shut, leaning against it, gasping. My rational mind screamed, condensation, temperature difference, stress. But the cold knob, the impossible writing, the smell, it felt too real, too present. I spent the rest of the night sitting upright on the edge of the bed, a kitchen knife I'd found in the desk drawer clutched in my trembling hand, staring at the bathroom door until the gray light of dawn seeped around the edges of the grimy window. I didn't sleep. I paced the small room, the photograph of Eleanor burning a hole in my pocket. I needed answers. At 7 a.m., I went down to the lobby. Luis was there, looking even more exhausted. "I need to talk to someone," I said, my voice tight. "About room 713. What's going on up there?" Luis sighed, a deep, weary sound. He closed his book. "Look, pal, it's just a room. An old room in an old hotel. Things happen. Pipes bang. Rats scratch. You're stressed. You're broke." "I get it." He wouldn't meet my eyes. "But the staff, they won't clean it after midnight? Why?" His shoulders slumped. "It's not policy. It's respect. For Eleanor." My blood ran cold. "Eleanor?" "Yeah, Eleanor Vance. Worked here, housekeeping, back in the late 70s. Sweet girl, quiet." He rubbed his temples. "One night, October 31st, 1978, she was cleaning 7113, last room on her list, midnight shift. She never came out." He paused, his voice dropping. "They found her, well, they found what was left in the bathtub, throat cut, by her boyfriend, jealous type. Snapped. Police said he came in, hid in the closet, waited for her. After, he hanged himself in the same room, in the bathroom." Luis shuddered. "They cleaned it up, of course. But the room, it never felt right again. Things moved. Sounds. Cold spots. Staff started getting sick on that floor, quitting. Management tried sealing it off, but the owners back then, superstitious types, said sealing it in just made it worse, trapped the anger. So they keep it open. Cheap room for desperate people. But no one cleans it after dark. It's her time, her shift. We leave her be. Pay our respects by staying away." He looked at me, his eyes pleading. "Check out today, please, before tonight. It's not worth the savings." I should have left right then. But pride, or maybe a stubborn refusal to be chased out by a ghost story, made me stay. "I'll be fine," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "Just superstitious nonsense." I went back to 713, the weight of Luis's words pressing down on me. I took the photograph of Eleanor out. Her smile seemed sad now, knowing what I knew. I placed it carefully on the desk, facing the bed. "I'm sorry," I whispered to the empty room. "I'm so sorry." The day passed in a haze of dread. I tried to read, tried to sleep, But every creak of the building, every distant shout from the street made me jump. The shadows in the corners seemed deeper, more watchful. The smell of decay lingered faintly, no matter how much I opened the stubborn window. As dusk fell, painting the air shaft outside in shades of bruised purple and gray, the atmosphere in the room thickened. It wasn't just cold. It was a deep, bone-chilling cold that seeped through my clothes. The buzzing, fluorescent light in the hallway outside my door flickered violently, then died, plunging the corridor into near darkness. Lit only by the dim emergency exit sign at the far end, I sat on the edge of the bed, the knife in my lap, my eyes fixed on the bathroom door. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 11:58 p.m. The dripping started again. Drip, drip, drip. Slow, rhythmic, impossibly loud in the silence. Not from the sink this time, from the ceiling. I looked up. Water wasn't falling, but the sound was there, echoing as if from a great depth. Then the scritch, scritch, scritch began, not on the door, on the wall beside the bed, like fingernails dragging slowly down the plaster beneath the peeling wallpaper. My breath came in shallow gasps. The cold intensified, frosting my breath in the dim light from the street lamp outside. The dripping stopped. The scratching stopped. An absolute, suffocating silence fell. Then a new sound, a soft, wet, gurgling breath. It came from the bathroom, not the doorway, from inside the room near the foot of the bed. I couldn't move, couldn't scream. My body was locked in terror. The breath came again, closer now. I could feel the displacement of air, a cold pressure moving towards me. The smell of decay and blood was overwhelming, thick enough to coat my tongue. A shape began to coalesce in the deepest shadow near the closet door. Not fully formed, but a deeper darkness. A suggestion of a figure hunched over, the glint of something wet and dark on the floor beneath it. A low, broken moan escaped it, a sound of pure, unending sorrow that vibrated in my bones. It wasn't anger I felt radiating from it. It was despair, a profound, bottomless grief that made my own eyes sting. The figure shifted, turning slightly. In the faint light from the window, I saw long, dark, wet hair clinging to a pale, indistinct face. One hand, slick with something dark, reached out towards me, trembling. "Don't look back." The words from the mirror screamed in my mind, but I couldn't look away. I was frozen, trapped in the gaze of a sorrow that had festered in this room for nearly 50 years. The hand stopped inches from my knee. The gurgling breath hitched. A single, choked sob escaped the shadow. Then the figure slowly raised its head. Where a face should have been was a ruin, a dark, wet hollow where the throat had been severed. But the eyes were clear, human, and filled with such infinite sadness that it shattered something inside me. Eleanor, not a monster, a victim, trapped. A choked whisper, barely audible, seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Cold, so cold. The sound of a cleaning cart rattling violently in the hallway shattered the moment. The figure vanished instantly, as if snuffed out. The oppressive cold lifted slightly, replaced by a wave of icy sweat on my skin. I heard brisk footsteps stopping outside my door. A key scraped in the lock. Marta stood there, her face pale, her eyes wide with terror. She wasn't holding cleaning supplies. She held a small, worn rosary in one hand and a spray bottle of what smelled like vinegar and herbs in the other. Her cart was empty. "You shouldn't be here," she hissed, her voice trembling. "After midnight. I told Luis you were still here." She quickly stepped inside, slamming the door shut behind her, fumbling to lock it. She didn't look at me. Her eyes scanned the room, lingering on the spot near the bed where the figure had been. "She's upset. You stayed. You looked." She made the sign of the cross rapidly over the doorway, then the bed, then the bathroom door. The sharp, clean scent of the herbal spray cut through the lingering decay. I saw her," I stammered, tears streaming down my face. "Eleanor, she's so sad." Marta's shoulders slumped. She looked at me, her own eyes glistening. She always is, every night, waiting for her shift to end, waiting to go home. But she can't. The anger, his anger, it binds her here, like chains. She walked to the desk, her movements quick and nervous. She picked up the photograph of Eleanor I'd left there. Her thumb stroked the young woman's face. He trapped her, even after death. The hotel, it holds on to pain, especially rooms like this. She placed the photo back down, carefully. "You need to leave, now, before he wakes up. He doesn't like visitors, especially not when she's visible." "Who?" I whispered, dread coiling in my stomach. "The one who did this," Marta said, her voice dropping to a terrified whisper. "He's still here, too, in the quiet, in the shadows, behind her sorrow. When she gets too loud, too. Scene! He comes to silence her. Again." As if on cue, the temperature plummeted once more. The overhead light in the room flickered wildly, then died completely, plunging us into near darkness. Only the faint, flickering glow from the hallway emergency light under the door illuminated the room. The gurgling breath returned, but this time it was deeper, wetter, accompanied by a low guttural growl that vibrated the floorboards. It came from the bathroom. Marta gasped, clutching her rosary so tightly her knuckles turned white. "His presence," she breathed. "He knows you saw her. He doesn't like witnesses." The growl intensified, closer now. The doorknob of the bathroom began to rattle violently, as if someone was trying to force it open from the inside. Not scratching. Rattling. With violent, impatient force. Marta grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Come on, now!" She yanked me towards the door. I snatched my duffel bag and the photograph of Eleanor from the desk. As Marta fumbled with the lock, the bathroom door burst open with a splintering crack. The light from the hallway bled into the room, casting long, monstrous shadows. Framed in the bathroom doorway was a shape that made my blood freeze. It was tall, indistinct, a coalescence of the deepest shadows, but I could see the thick rope-like cord hanging from its neck, swaying slightly. Its face was a featureless void, but I felt its gaze, a wave of pure malicious hatred that stole my breath. It let out a roar that wasn't sound, but a physical pressure against my chest, filled with rage and possessiveness. It lunged, not towards Marta, but towards the spot where Eleanor's sorrowful figure had stood. Marta threw the door open and shoved me into the hall. I stumbled, falling hard on the threadbare carpet. She slammed the door shut behind us, fumbling desperately with her keys to lock it. The lock clicked just as a tremendous thud shook the door in its frame, followed by that same silent, hate-filled roar that vibrated through the wood. The door handle rattled violently, then stopped. An eerie silence fell, broken only by our ragged breathing and the frantic buzzing of the single working fluorescent light down the hall. Marta leaned against the opposite wall, sliding down to sit on the floor, trembling. She made the sign of the cross over and over. "He's back in the quiet," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "For now. But he knows you were here. He remembers." She looked at me, her eyes filled with a fear that went beyond the supernatural. "You have to go. Tonight. Don't come back. Don't even look at this hotel again. He marks those he sees. He waits." I didn't argue. I couldn't. My legs felt like jelly as I stumbled down the silent, buzzing hallway towards the stairs. I didn't wait for the groaning elevator. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the sound of my footsteps echoing like gunshots in the concrete well. I burst out into the lobby. Luis was gone. The desk was empty. The only light was the flickering neon sign outside, casting its sickly glow through the glass doors. I fumbled the brass key onto the counter, my hand shaking so badly I could barely let go of it. I didn't look back. I ran out into the cold night air. The city sounds a blessed, chaotic roar after the suffocating silence of the 7th floor. I found a cheap motel 2 blocks away, paid cash for a room with a deadbolt and a window that actually opened. I locked the door, pushed a chair under the knob, and sat on the bed with my back against the wall, the photograph of Eleanor clutched in my hand. Dawn felt like a lifetime away. I kept replaying Marta's words. He marks those he sees. He waits. I left the city the next morning, didn't look back, but sometimes in the deepest part of the night, when the house is silent and the shadows stretch long across my bedroom floor, I hear it, faint at first. A soft, rhythmic scritch, scritch, scritch on the wall beside my bed. Then the wet, gurgling breath, and beneath it, a low, guttural growl that vibrates the floorboards, filled with a hatred that hasn't faded in 50 years. I freeze. I don't turn on the light. I don't look toward the shadows in the corner. I just hold Eleanor's photograph tightly, whispering into the darkness. I see you. I remember. Because I know. He's waiting. He's patient. And he never forgets a face. The cold spot near the closet door grows deeper, and the dripping starts again, not from the sink, from the ceiling. Drip, drip, drip. Midnight is coming, and housekeeping won't be stopping by. And that ends this story. A new one starts now. Voices keep whispering through the keyhole of my bedroom door. The house on Hemlock Street wasn't a choice. It was surrender. After the divorce papers dried and the bank account bled out, the only thing left that didn't require a credit check or a cosigner was this sagging Victorian relic on the edge of town, inherited from an aunt I barely remembered. Its address was a footnote in my life, until everything else collapsed. The realtor, a man whose smile never reached his eyes, called it a fixer-upper with character. He didn't mention the way the floorboards groaned like wounded animals beneath your feet, or how the perpetual scent of damp plaster clung to the air no matter how many windows you threw open. He certainly didn't mention the keyhole. My bedroom was at the end of the 2nd floor hallway, a small, high-ceilinged room with a single window overlooking the overgrown backyard. The door was solid oak, heavy and old, with a tarnished brass knob and a keyhole that looked like a dark, unblinking eye. The first night, exhausted from hauling boxes and the weight of my own failure, I barely noticed it. I locked the door out of habit, a flimsy ritual of safety, and fell into a sleep so deep it felt like drowning. I woke just after 3 a.m., not to a sound, but to a presence. The room was freezing, my breath frosting in the moonlight slicing through the window, and then I heard it, faint, delicate, like dry leaves skittering across stone. It came from the keyhole. Jamie. My childhood name, the one only my grandmother used, the one I hadn't heard in 20 years. My skin prickled. I sat up, straining in the gloom. Silence. Just the old house settling. I told myself it was the wind whistling through a crack, or maybe a neighbor's late-night argument drifting up from the street. I pulled the blankets tighter, dismissing it as the fractured dream logic of a stressed mind. But the cold didn't leave. It deepened, centering on the door. The next night it was clearer, not wind, a whisper, low and wet, as if the speaker's mouth was filled with soil. Cold in the walls, Jamie, so cold. It was a woman's voice, young but layered with a terrible weariness. I froze in bed, heart hammering against my ribs. I flicked on the bedside lamp. The warm light did nothing to dispel the chill radiating from the door. I crept closer, stopping a foot away. The keyhole was just a dark circle in the brass plate. I pressed my ear to the wood beside it, holding my breath. Silence. Then closer, intimate, as if the lips were pressed against the other side of the keyhole. You left the light on? She always left the light on. A pause, a soft, wet sniffle. It made the shadows jump. I recoiled like I'd been burned. Who was she? My grandmother? I'd never told anyone about her habit of sleeping with the hall light on, terrified of the dark corners of her own bedroom. Panic, cold and sharp, cut through my exhaustion. I threw back the covers and yanked open the bedroom door. The hallway was empty. Dust motes danced in the amber glow of the single bulb at the far end. The door to the spare room across the hall stood shut. The bathroom door was closed. Downstairs, the grandfather clock in the foyer gave a single hollow bong. 3:07 a.m. I stood there, shivering in my sweatpants, listening to the silence of the empty house. My rational mind scrambled for explanations. Pipes, mice in the walls, auditory hallucinations triggered by stress and cheap wine, but the voice had known my name, my childhood name, and the detail about the light. That was a memory buried so deep I hadn't thought of it in decades. I didn't sleep again that night. I sat in the armchair by the window, wrapped in a blanket, watching the door. The cold spot near the keyhole never faded. The whispers became a nightly ritual, always starting just after 3 a.m., always through the keyhole. Sometimes they were fragmented, nonsensical. The peaches are rotten on the vine, or sewed the buttons on backwards. Other times, chillingly precise. You cried when the goldfish died, Jamie. You buried it under the lilac bush. I had buried a goldfish under a lilac bush when I was 6. My mother had scolded me for digging up her garden. No one else knew that. No one. The voice never raised. It never threatened. It just observed, reminisced. It spoke of small, forgotten things. The pattern of chipped paint on my grandmother's kitchen ceiling, the smell of the lavender sachets she kept in her dresser drawers, the exact shade of blue on my first bicycle. It spoke with a familiarity that curdled my blood. It knew the texture of my childhood fears. You were afraid of the clown lamp in the hallway, it whispered one night, its breath frosting the brass keyhole plate. The one with the too wide smile. You made her cover it with a towel. My throat closed. I had made my grandmother cover that hideous lamp? I'd been 7. I started researching the house. The local historical society archives were dusty and smelled of mildew. The house was built in 1898 for a man named Silas Crow, a reclusive watchmaker. His wife, Eleanor, died young. Consumption, the record said. They had one daughter, Clara. Clara vanished in 1913 at the age of 12. No body was ever found, presumed runaway or worse. The file contained a single faded photograph, a stern-faced man, a frail woman, holding a little girl with dark braids and wide, solemn eyes. Clara's eyes. I stared at that photo for a long time, a cold certainty settling in my gut. The voice wasn't my grandmother's, it was Clara's. Trapped. Waiting. I bought a heavy deadbolt for my bedroom door. The hardware store clerk, an old man with rheumy eyes, watched me carefully as I paid. "House on Hemlock, eh?" he rasped. "That deadbolt won't hold back what's already inside." I ignored him, my hands trembling as I installed it that afternoon, the brass key cold in my palm. That night, I locked both the knob and the deadbolt, double-checking the chain I'd also added. I left the bedside lamp burning, a fragile island of light in the oppressive dark. 3:03 a.m. The cold seeped through the wood, deeper than before. The keyhole seemed to breathe, a plume of frost onto the hallway side of the door, and the whisper came, muffled but clear through the layers of wood and metal. "You put up walls, Jamie, like she did, but walls have holes, walls have eyes." A pause, a wet clicking sound like a tongue against dry teeth. "I can see you, under the blanket. Your eyes are open. You're scared. Don't be scared. I just want to talk like we used to." I buried my face in the pillow, tears hot on my cheeks. "I never knew you," I whispered back, my voice raw. "I wasn't even born when you disappeared." Silence. Then a sound that wasn't a whisper, a soft, broken sob so close it felt like it came from inside the room with me. "You were born from her tears." The voice sighed. "She cried for me every night after you came, after the other baby came. She held you and whispered my name into your hair. You carry her sadness. You carry my silence." The words struck a chord so deep it stole my breath. My mother had been prone to sudden, inexplicable bouts of weeping when I was a child. She'd never explained why. The deadbolt was useless. The next morning, I found the chain lying on the floor, snapped cleanly in half as if crushed by invisible hands. The deadbolt was thrown back. The keyhole plate was frosted over, intricate ice crystals spreading across the brass like delicate lace. And on the hallway floor, directly in front of my door, lay a single, perfect, dew-kissed dandelion puffball. It shouldn't have survived the frost. It shouldn't have been there at all. Desperation drove me to the local library's occult section, a dusty corner, smelling of neglect. I found a crumbling volume on Victorian spiritualism and home hauntings. The pages crackled as I turned them under the flickering fluorescent light. One passage stood out, underlined in faded pencil by some previous reader. "The lingerers bind themselves to apertures, keyholes, cracks beneath doors, the spaces between floorboards. These become their mouths, their eyes. They whisper not to frighten, but to be heard, to be remembered. They feed on attention, on the warmth of a living voice answering back. Silence starves them. Denial starves them. But acknowledgement invites them in." Below it, in a different hand, someone had scrawled, "Don't answer, don't give it your name." That night, I barricaded the door with my heavy oak dresser. I turned off all lights. I lay in the pitch black, covers pulled over my head, squeezing my eyes shut, repeating in my head, "I don't hear you. I don't know you. You are not here." The cold intensified, biting through the blankets. The keyhole became a vortex of freezing air. The whispers started anyway, muffled but persistent, slithering under the door, through the cracks. "Jamie, why won't you talk to me? It's lonely in the walls. Remember the dandelions? We made wishes." She promised she'd find me. She never looked under the floorboards. The last one cut through my resolve. Under the floorboards? My grandmother's house had wide, creaking floorboards. I'd spent hours prying them up, searching for lost marbles. I'd never thought to wonder what else might be hidden beneath. I couldn't take it. My voice tore from my throat, harsh and trembling. "What floorboards? Clara, what floorboards?" Silence, thick, heavy, expectant. Then a sigh of pure relief that seemed to warm the freezing air for a fraction of a second. "You remember my name?" The whisper breathed, filled with a terrible, childlike joy. "You came back." The dresser blocking the door groaned. Not the house settling. A deep, resonant creak of stressed wood. The legs scraped slowly, deliberately across the hardwood floor, inching away from the door. I scrambled out of bed, grabbing the baseball bat I kept propped by the window. The deadbolt clicked open by itself. The doorknob turned. The door swung inward silently. The hallway was dark, colder than my room. At the far end, near the top of the stairs, stood a figure, small, dressed in a simple, old-fashioned white nightgown, stained dark at the hem. Its back was to me. Its dark hair was in two braids, just like the girl in the photograph. It didn't turn. It just stood there, staring down the dark staircase. The air smelled of wet earth and crushed dandelions. "Clara?" My voice was a thread. Slowly, painfully slowly, the figure began to turn. Not its body, just its head. It rotated a full 180 degrees on its thin neck, the braids swinging forward. Where a face should have been was a smooth, featureless oval of pale, damp-looking skin. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, wet blankness. But from that blankness came the whisper, clear and close, as if standing right beside me in the room. "She kept me under the floorboards, Jamie, in the dark. She was afraid of what Father would do if he found me broken." A wet, choked sound. "I waited so long for her to come back. She never did, but you have her eyes, her sadness. You called my name." The featureless face tilted. The blankness seemed to drink the dim light from my room. "Come see," it whispered. "Come see where I wait. It's warmer with two." The small figure took a step towards me, gliding silently over the floorboards. The cold radiating from it made my teeth chatter. The smell of grave soil filled my nostrils. I raised the bat, my arms shaking. "Stay back!" The blank face didn't react. But the whisper came again, not from the figure now, but from the keyhole behind me, from the crack under my door, from the very walls themselves. A chorus of wet, overlapping voices, all Clara's, all layered with the echoes of other children, other lost voices. "She's afraid. She always was afraid. But you don't have to be afraid, Jamie. The dark isn't empty. The dark is full of us, waiting, remembering. Come hold my hand. It's not cold where I am, not anymore." The figure reached out a small, pale hand. The fingers were too long. The nails were black and broken. It wasn't the hand of a child. It was the hand of something that had been buried. something that had learned to wait in the absolute dark for a century. I screamed, a raw, animal sound of pure terror. I swung the bat wildly, not at the figure, but at the door. I slammed it shut, throwing my weight against it, fumbling for the deadbolt with numb fingers. I heard a soft thump as the figure hit the other side. Then silence. The cold receded just a fraction. I slid down the door, the bat clattering to the floor, sobbing. I didn't leave the room for 2 days. I had water bottles and protein bars in my backpack. I pushed the dresser back against the door. I didn't sleep. I just sat in the corner farthest from the keyhole, watching it, waiting. The whispers didn't return. The cold didn't return. The silence was worse. It felt like being watched, waited for. On the third night, exhaustion won. My head nodded forward. I jerked awake just after 3 a.m. The room was freezing. My breath plumed in the moonlight. The keyhole was frosted over again, intricate ice crystals spreading like veins across the brass. And the whisper came softer than ever, intimate, filled with a terrible understanding. "You're tired, Jamie. We're all tired. The walls are tired. The floorboards are tired. Let me in. Let me show you where it's quiet, where no one will ever leave you again." I didn't answer. I pressed my back harder against the wall, pulling my knees to my chest. But the voice wasn't done. It shifted. Became my grandmother's voice, thin and frail with age, the voice I remembered from childhood summers. "Oh, my sweet Jamie girl, come to Nana. It's all right. It's just Clara. She's lonely. She just wants a friend. Let her in. It's so dark under the floorboards, so dark." The voice broke into a sob that echoed the one I'd heard through the keyhole. I should have looked. I was so afraid. "Forgive me, Jamie, forgive me." Tears streamed down my face. The guilt, the old buried guilt of a child who sensed a deep sorrow she couldn't fix, surged up. My grandmother had carried this for 60 years, and now Clara carried it too, trapped, waiting, wanting only to be remembered, to be seen. The deadbolt clicked open, not rattled, not forced. It simply unlatched with a soft, final snick. The chain, already broken, hung loose. The dresser groaned again, scraping back from the door without visible force. The brass knob turned slowly. I didn't move. I didn't reach for the bat. The cold wasn't just in the room anymore. It was in my bones, a deep, familiar ache. The whisper came again, not from the keyhole now, but from right beside me on the bed. A small, cold weight settled on the mattress. The smell of damp earth and crushed dandelions filled my nose. A small, icy hand touched mine where it lay clenched on my knee. The fingers were long. The nails were broken. "Shh," Clara whispered, her voice now a blend of the child and the ancient thing she'd become, a sound like roots shifting in deep soil. No more walls, no more locks, just quiet, just us. Her featureless face, smooth and wet in the moonlight, hovered near mine. There was no malice in the blankness, only a bottomless, patient hunger for connection, for an end to the silence. "Tell me about the goldfish," she breathed, her cold breath frosting my cheek. "Tell me his name." I closed my eyes. The cold hand tightened on mine, not painfully, but with a desperate, clinging need. The voice of my grandmother faded, replaced by the deep, resonant hum of the old house settling, not wood on wood, but stone on stone, earth on bone. The frost on the keyhole glowed faintly in the dark. The whispers didn't stop. They multiplied, Faint, overlapping murmurs seeped from the walls, the floorboards, the very air. Stay, remember us. Be quiet with us. My grandmother's voice surfaced one last time, a sigh in the chorus. It's all right, Jamie girl. It's warm in the dark, warmer than alone. I turned my head slowly on the pillow. In the moonlight, the smooth, wet oval of Clara's face reflected the pale light. No eyes to look into, no mouth to read. Just an emptiness that promised an end to loneliness, an end to being the one left behind. The small, cold hand squeezed mine again. A question, an invitation. The whispers swelled, a gentle tide of forgotten names and half-remembered sorrows. The cold wasn't biting anymore. It was deep. It was familiar. It was the cold of the earth waiting, the cold of a secret kept too long. My lips moved, dry and cracked. The name came out a whisper, lost in the chorus, but she heard it. She always heard. Bubbles, I breathed. The cold hand tightened. A sigh of profound relief, like the earth finally accepting a long-awaited rain, filled the room. The whispers softened, harmonizing into a single, deep, comforting vibration that resonated in my bones. The frost on the keyhole melted, dripping onto the floorboards like tears. The moonlight seemed to dim, not fading, but deepening, becoming richer, softer, safer. I didn't get up. I didn't reach for the light. I turned my hand in Clara's icy grip, lacing my fingers through hers. The broken nails scratched my skin, but the pain was distant, unimportant. The vibration grew stronger, a lullaby hummed by the house itself, by the earth beneath it, by all the quiet ones waiting in the walls. The smell of damp earth and dandelions wrapped around me like a blanket. Warmth began to seep into my frozen limbs, not the heat of a fire, but the deep, slow warmth of stone absorbing the sun, the warmth of belonging. The last thing I saw before I closed my eyes was the keyhole. No longer a dark eye, it glowed with a soft, steady light, the color of old honey, a welcome light. The whispers weren't in my ears anymore. They were in my blood, in my breath, in the slow, steady beat of my heart, finally syncing with the deep, patient rhythm of the house. Clara's head rested gently on my shoulder, a small, cold weight that felt like home. The silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was waiting. It was mine. I sank into the mattress, deeper than I'd ever sunk before. The bed wasn't just under me anymore. It was part of the floor, part of the walls, part of the dark, warm earth beneath the floorboards. The last coherent thought drifted away like a dandelion seed on a breeze. No one will ever leave us here. And then there was only the hum, the deep, resonant hum of the walls, the hum of the quiet, the hum of home. I smiled in the perfect, waiting dark. Clara's fingers tightened on mine. The keyhole light dimmed, not going out, but sinking deep like a star settling into the earth. And the house on Hemlock Street held its breath, full at last. This story ends here. It's time to move on to the next.